Hello there, this is Rahul, and before we start this particular Azure course, I would like to set some ground rule. So this course is going to be a little longer course because we are going to touch upon quite a various topics throughout this course. So I will put all the timestamp into the description section, so feel free to jump around those topics if you really feel difficulty navigating around this particular course. And most important question, what are the topics we are going to touch base and demo into this particular course? So we are going to start with the most basic service of our Azure cloud, which is our Azure Virtual Machine. So first we are going to take a look like what is Azure Virtual Machine and how we can create our first Azure Virtual Machine using Linux machine as well as using our Windows based virtual machine. Once you feel comfortable that I am able to provision a virtual machine on an Azure cloud, then we are going to increase the complexity and then we are going to use the ARM template as well as Terraform to provision the same virtual machine concept. And once you are able to work comfortably by starting or setting up your virtual machine using ARM template Terraform, then we are going to increase the complexity and then we will introduce the concept of a load balancer, so that you can use the load balancer to route the request onto the virtual machine which you have previously learned. And once you are comfortable with the load balancer, then we are going to increase the complexity to introduce the one more concept of a scale set, so that you know like how you can create a scale set of virtual machine, how you can attach a load balancer, and with the help of load balancer, how you can route the request to the virtual machines. So there is a lot to cover into this particular course, but this particular course on my YouTube channel is just a subset of my Udemy course. So on Udemy course, I have already published around 40 to 50 chapters for Azure Cloud, which will take you from a ground zero to a very confident level where you will feel comfortable working with the Azure Cloud. And that Udemy course I'm regularly updating and keep on adding the new chapter. So along with the concept, I will also be publishing onto that particular course about the interview preparation, how you can structure your resume, cover letter, and what are the industry practices which we follow while working on the different cloud, which includes Azure as our main cloud. So go check out that particular course, and I'll also post the course link into the description section. So feel free to check out that particular course if that really interests you. Let's move to the next chapter, and here we are going to talk about the Azure Compute Services. And here in this chapter, we are going to focus on the basic compute services which is offered from the Azure cloud. Here onto the screen, you can see these are the four basic services which are offered from the Azure cloud. The first one is the virtual machine. Second one is the app services. Third one is the Azure Kubernetes services. And the fourth one is the Azure functions. So these are the basic category of the compute services which are offered from the Azure cloud. And here, one of the most used compute service from the Azure is the virtual machine. And that's what we are going to focus on this particular chapter. Now, when we are talking about the virtual machines on Azure, then it is really important for us to understand the behind the scene architecture of our Azure virtual machine. So here onto the diagram, you can see that we have four layers of our virtual machine. So these four layers are the basic building blocks for running a virtual machine onto our Azure cloud. And this is how the Microsoft Azure is going to manage our virtual machines. Now, the first layer in this particular virtual machine architecture is our host layer. So this host layer is something, a physical server, which is sitting into the Azure Cloud Data Center, which is managed by Microsoft Azure. And this server has a really high configuration in terms of CPU, memory, and disk storage, because onto this particular physical machine, the virtual machines are provisioned. Now, how the virtual machines are provisioned, that's where our hypervisor comes in. So on top of our physical host machine, which is managed by Azure, then there comes a hypervisor which manages our virtual machine, which installed on top of our host OS. Then comes our guest OS, that is our virtual machine. So this is where our virtual machine comes into picture. And here we can provision different types of virtual machine, which can be Windows, which can be Linux. And in the Linux also, we have a different flavors of a virtual machine. So you can choose what kind of a virtual machine you want to provision. So this hypervisor, which is sitting in between the guest OS, which is this one, and the host OS. It acts as a bridge between the guest OS and the host OS so that our virtual machine can run onto that data center premises. And at last, there comes a application binary, which is this one, which is sitting into our guest OS. And these application binaries are the binaries which we want to deploy or run inside our guest OS, which is this one. It can be a Windows machine or it can be a Linux machine of our choice. And this particular thing, which is guest OS, including application binary, this is managed by us. So this is something which is managed by us and where Azure Cloud doesn't interfere. The only responsibility of Azure Cloud is to manage this hypervisor and this host OS. Rest of the things are managed by us in our application binary as well as into our guest OS. So if something goes wrong in our application binary or in guest OS, then it's our responsibility to go and fix all of those errors which we are facing into those our virtual machine. Now, when we will do the demo very soon, then here we are going to play around with these two layers. First, we are going to provision our guest OS, and after provisioning of a guest OS, we will try to access our virtual machine. And then in that virtual machine, we are going to install some of the binaries so that we can see how we can play around with that particular virtual machine. To start with the demo, this is my Azure portal, and here first we are going to go to the resource group so that we can create a resource group for our virtual machine demo. So here I'm just going to create a new resource group over here, and the subscription which I have already created for my account. So here I'm just going to create a resource group. So I'm just going to put resource group virtual machine demo, and the region I'm just going to choose is the North Europe one, because it is nearest to me. Then click next, review and create, and then just click on create, and this will create a resource group in which we are going to create our first virtual machine. So here you can see our resource group has been created, which is this one. All right, so now after creating a resource group, let's go ahead and then create our first virtual machine. So here just type virtual machine, click on the virtual machine. And here you can see there are a few virtual machines which I have already created, but don't worry about it. We are going to create a fresh one. So just click on fresh, click on Azure Virtual Machine. And here first we are going to see the Linux based virtual machine and how we can provision it and how we can access it. And then later on, we are going to take a look onto the Windows virtual machine, how to provision it onto Azure. Okay, so here our subscription is already selected. The next thing is resource group. So resource group, which is our resource group VM demo, which we have recently created. The name of the virtual machine is I'm just going to put the Linux virtual machine demo. The region is Europe, North Europe, because our resource group is also in the same region, and our region is also for our virtual machine is North Europe. Availability zone, so I'm just gonna go with the default option. I'm not gonna change anything because we just want to see how to provision the virtual machine. Rest of the things we are gonna take it later when we will go more into the advanced concept of virtual machine. Okay, zone, I'm just going to select zone 1 over here. If you want to have a maximum availability for your virtual machine, then you can select multiple zones over here. But since I'm doing it for the demo purpose, so I'm just going to select one zone over here. Security type, just go with the default option over here. And the image, I'm just going to use the Ubuntu. You can choose any other flavor of your Linux operating system for your virtual machine. Architecture x64. If you have a need for ARM, then you can go for ARM64. Otherwise, it just sticks with the x64 over here. And I'm doing it for the demo purpose, so I'm gonna choose the a standard pricing plan so that I get a minimum cost. But if you really want to do for your application deployment, then please go and check the higher configuration which suits your need for your application. All right. Then the next thing, how we are going to access our application or a virtual machine. So there are two ways you can access. There is a username and password, and the other one is the SSH keys. So username and password is quite simple, but I would always recommend to go with the SSH keys because SSH keys are the practices which are followed in the industry, and it is assumed to be the most secure way of securing the login to your virtual machine. So I would highly recommend to go with the SSH key, and I'm just going to show you how we can create our SSH key for accessing this virtual machine for our Linux virtual machine. All right, so now the authentication type I have selected is SSH public key. After that, the username, I'm just gonna go with the Azure user, and then here SSH public key source. So I'm gonna generate the new key pair for this particular virtual machine. SSH key type, so here you can select RSA SSH format. Linux key pair name, so here this is the name I'm just gonna go with. So Linux VM demo key, and this key will be downloaded because once I provision the virtual machine, then it is going to download that particular key for me, and it will contain public key and private key. But don't worry, I'm just gonna show you everything once it's ready and how to download and how to access that SSH key. It's really simple. And after that, you need to select the inbound port. So let me explain this particular part of inbound port. So if I jump to the demo over here, so here I have created a very basic like a flow, like how you will access your virtual machine. So here there are two types of virtual machine. One is your Windows. I'm not talking about Windows, but I'm here talking about the Linux machine, which is this one. This is the demo which we are doing. So if a user wants to access this particular virtual machine, which is our Linux virtual machine, then there should be a port which needs to be opened. And that port for Linux machines are 22. So this port needs to be enabled and open for that virtual machine. Otherwise, this user will not be able to access or log in into that virtual machine using the public IP. The public IP part we are going to see later. And the same goes with the Windows machine as well. So for accessing the Windows virtual machine, you need to enable the port 3389. If you don't have that port enabled, then you will not be able to access that virtual machine. Okay, so if you go back now, so here you can see the inbound port, which is 22, we need to enable. Okay, then click on next disk. So now we have configured the primary things, which is like a username, SSH key, and the port and the region, and also the username for our virtual machine. Here is the disk size. So I'm just going with the default one, which is 30 gigs. And rest of the things, I'm not going to change anything over here. Then I'll go ahead and click on networking. So here there are VPC which I have created and subnet I have created, but here just don't worry about this VPC and subnet, because in the networking section we are going to see how the VPC is created, how the subnet is created, and how we can put our virtual machine into it. But for the time being, just ignore that particular part of it. Okay, so here you can see there is a Linux demo, Linux VM demo, virtual private network, which is available for us to select that one. Subnet, I'm just going to stick with the default one. And the public IP, yes, we want to have a public IP. So here, instead of none, we want to have that public IP assigned to this particular virtual machine. Rest, just make sure that you have an inbound port 22 selected so that you can access that particular virtual machine. And after that, just keep everything default. We just don't want to associate any load balancer or any other thing. Then click on review and create. And once the validation is passed, then you will see that validation green mark over here. And after that, you can just simply click on create over here. And it will download first. It will first let you download the private key for the SSH key, which we are going to use for SSH into or login into our virtual machine. So as I told you, there is a public key and there is a private key. So here we are going to download the private key for ourselves, and the public key will already be associated with our virtual machine by Azure. So this private key, you need to keep it with you because this is this belongs to you and that needs to be kept securely. So just click on download this private key over here. And here you can see this key has been downloaded, which we are going to take a look later. Okay, after that, it started the deployment. So I'll be back once this deployment is ready here. So here you can see our virtual machine is ready. And if we go to search box once again, click on the virtual machines over here. And here you can see our Linux demo virtual machine is up and running. And here we also got the public IP, which you can see over here. And we are going to use this public IP to access this particular virtual machine. And to access this particular virtual machine, what you need to do, you just need to click on connect over here, click on connect. I'm just going to talk about this connect via Bastion also, but first let's click on this connect. And here this is the public IP which we will be using. And if you go further down, then here you will find the option. So SSH using the Azure CLI, which you can use from here, this is the Azure CLI. But in our case, we are gonna use the native SSH because this is what everyone uses in the industry. So I'm just gonna stick with the native SSH option. So click on select over here, and here it will give you the command. So this is the command which we need to use, but we need to modify this particular command based on the SSH key we are having onto our local machine, and then we will be able to SSH into our virtual machine. So copy this command from here and open the terminal. Since I'm using Mac OS, so I have the terminal like a natively built in. But if you are using Windows machine and if you have provisioned the Linux virtual machine on Azure, then I would recommend you to use either WSL or Putty. So with those two things, you should be able to perform the same activity which I'm doing. So stick with WSL or just download the Putty, and in the Putty you can configure your private key. And also, if you don't know like how to configure, then don't worry, you can manually specify the path of this private key in the Putty, and then you should be able to connect to that particular virtual machine with the terminal. Anyway, so first of all, I'll show you the file. So this is, you can see this is the private key of my virtual machine. So one thing we need to verify over here is the permission. So any private key has to have a read-only permission. So here you can see it has a read and write permission, which you can see. This is the file, or this is a private key, and it has a read and write permission. So let me change that. So I'm just gonna do change mode 400, and then I'm just gonna specify the file name. Let's verify the permissions, and here you can see it is a read-only file right now. Clear the screen, and then again copy the command from here to SSH and paste it over here. And there are a couple of things which we need to change over here. So first of all, this is the path. So here you can see this is the path which we want to modify, otherwise we will not be able to SSH. So SSH-I, and here we need to enter the private key which is available onto the same location where I'm right now. So here I'll explain the command once again. So SSH-I, then the private key which is on the same location, and then the Azure user, the username for my virtual machine, and the public IP of that particular virtual machine, and then hit enter. Type yes to connect. And here you can see we are able to access our virtual machine, which you can see. And if you go up, then here you will find the IP address, which is our private IP address, the system load, usage, memory usage, swap usage. So here, this is the virtual machine which is accessible for me. And this is the virtual machine which I have just provisioned onto the Azure cloud. Now we have seen how to provision a virtual machine which is of type Linux. Let's take a look on how we can provision the Windows virtual machine onto Azure cloud. So here again, go to the virtual machine section over here, click on this and click on create a new virtual machine, create a Azure virtual machine option over here, select that one. Select the resource group, which is this resource group, and here we need to choose the virtual machine type. So here I'm going to choose the Windows virtual machine demo. Reason, I'm just going to use North Europe. Availability zone is default. Availability zone is zone 1 over here. And here we need to choose the machine. So here I'm just going to choose Windows. Let's see what are the options we are having. So I'm just going to go with, let's go with the Windows 11 Zen 2 machine. And here I'm just going to choose the standard one. And here we need to use the username. So I'm just going to use Azure user over here. And since it's a Windows machine, so let me check if we have an option. So we don't have an option of SSH key, that is only available for our Linux machine. So here we need to choose the password. So I'm just going to choose the password over here. So I'm just going to put some strong password so that it is secure. It is asking to be a 12 character or 123 character. Okay, no worries. So I'm just going to put some strong password over here. Okay, now the password has been set, and again I told you about the inbound port which needs to be open. So that port is 3389. So if you take a look onto the diagram over here, then we need to enable this particular port for accessing the Windows machine. Okay, then go to next to disk. So here I'm just gonna go with the default disk option, which is 127 gigs, which is a bit higher compared with the Linux machine. Then click next over here for the networking, and here just go with the default one because we are going to cover the networking part later. Public IP, yes, we want to have a public IP, and rest of the thing which you can keep it default over here. Then click on review and go to next management. Just skip all of these, keep everything default over here. Go to monitoring and then click advanced, and then I think let's go to tags and then review and create. Let me re-verify the detail. Let's go to the first one. Okay, and then click on, I need to confirm on this part, licensing part, then review and create. And here you can see the validation has passed. After that, I'll just click on create over here, and it will take a couple of minutes to start the virtual machine, and I'll be back once this deployment is done. As you can see, my Windows virtual machine is ready. It took a bit of a time to provision a Windows virtual machine, but let's take a look how we can connect to this particular Windows virtual machine. So here in the search box, again type the virtual machine, go to that particular virtual machine over here, and select the virtual machine, which is our Windows virtual machine over here. And here in the connect option, just click on connect. And here you will find quite a few options. So I'm just going to go with the RDP file, which is the most common one to connect to the Windows machine. So click on download RDP file, and it will download that RDP file for you. Just click on this RDP file. And once you click on it, then it will open that particular RDP file. If you're using the Windows machine, then it will open it there as well. So here I'm using some RDP client from from Mac OS, because I'm relying on I'm recording this particular demo on my Mac OS. So I'll wait for this particular RDP file to open. So here you can see it is asking me for the password. So I'm just gonna enter the password over here, and then click on continue, and it will start a connection. Then click on continue over here also, and it will start a new window session in another window. So it will open up a whole together a Windows machine, and then it will allow you to access that particular Windows machine. And here you can see I'm able to access this particular Windows machine. So this is the first time I'm accessing my Windows virtual machine. So it is taking a bit of a time to prepare that virtual machine. But with the help of this RDP file, you should be able to connect to your Windows machine, which you have just provisioned with the Azure cloud. Let's talk about the ARM template and how we can deploy our Azure virtual machine using the ARM template. Let's try to understand what this ARM template is and what is the purpose of this particular ARM template when it comes to deploying our virtual machine. So here onto the screen, you can see this is our ARM template, which we also call it as a Azure Resource Manager template. And this is in the form of JSON file. So whenever we create this template, then it has to be into the JSON format. So JSON format where we put a declarative syntax where we define like how many resources we want to provision. And here we are talking about the Azure Virtual Machine. So Azure Virtual Machine is just an example, but you can provision any kind of a resource using the ARM template of Azure. Let's break down this whole JSON template, which we also call it as an ARM template, line by line, and try to understand how we can write our own custom ARM template for provisioning of the resources. Let's start from the top, and the first thing which you can see over here is the schema, which is present over here in the line number 1 of your JSON file, or which is your ARM template as well. So here it is used for defining the structure and data format of your ARM template. Second comes the content version, and here we have defined the content version, which is 1.0.0.0, which is used for versioning system, for versioning your template for the development purposes. Third in the list is the parameters. So when we are creating this ARM template, then we need to define the parameter which we will be passing inside the template. So treat this as like a normal coding where we are passing some parameter to our function which we have defined. So it is just an example here I'm taking, but we have the feasibility of defining the parameter into the ARM template of Azure, and those parameter we can pass our custom values so that we can have a custom resources created using the ARM template. Next in the list is the variable. So here we can have some dynamic values assigned to our variable, which will also help us to define and create the resources based on our project needs with the help of our ARM template. And next, which is the most important one, is the resources. This is an important block and where we will be working most of the time, because in the resource block, we are going to define the structure of the resource, how we are going to create our resource. For example, how we are going to create a virtual machine. So that resource is going to be defined over here. So resource 1 and resource 2, it's just an example purpose. I have kept it over here so that you understand that in this resource section, we can create a virtual machine, we can create a VNet, we can create a subnet. So any resource which you can work with the Azure cloud can be created into this resource section. And this resource section is not only limited for one resource, you can have n number of resources present into this particular resource section. An ARM template will be able to create those resources for you once you apply those changes. Moving to the next is output section, where we can have some output printed onto the console. So whenever we execute this ARM template from a console or from the portal, then we need to upload this particular file, or we just need to execute some deploy command from the CLI if you're deploying from the CLI. And if you want to see some debugging message or some useful information onto the console, then we are going to use this output section of our ARM template. And at last in the list, which you can see over here, is the function where you can define your custom JSON expression if you really need inside your JSON ARM template. So before moving forward and before we provision our virtual machine, I would like to show you one sample ARM template which I'm using for creating the storage account. Although this particular example is for storage account creation, but since this is a template which is very small in size, so I thought it could be really easy for you to understand this particular JSON or ARM template. And then we will take an example on how to provision our virtual machine using the ARM template. And as I explained to you earlier into the slides, that what are the different components or the line items which are present into our JSON ARM template. So here you can see this is our schema. Here is the content version which we have defined. Here is the resources. And like in the previous example or the previous slide, I have told you that there could be parameters, there could be variables. So parameters and variables are optional. If you have a very complex ARM template, then you will need those parameters and variable. And if you don't have that complex like ARM template, then you don't need to have those parameters and variables. And here this ARM template is really simple, so that's why I have not used the variables, parameter, output and functions attribute of our ARM template. And here you can see this is the schema first I have defined, then I have defined the content version, and then I have defined the resources. And in the resources section, you can see I have to define the type, what kind of a resource I want to create. So here the type is storage account, that I have defined into the type. Second is the API version, what API version you are using, so that I have defined over here, which is present with this particular attribute. Third is the name. What is the name of our storage account? So this is the name of my storage account which I want to create. So here is the name of that particular resource. Location, where you want to create your storage account. So here I have defined the location, which is our North Europe. SKU, I have kept the SKU as a standard LRS, and the kind is storage v2. So these are the attributes which you see over here. These are very specific to our storage account which we are trying to provision. So if you are trying to provision instead of storage account, if you want to provision a virtual machine, then all of these attributes which is defined over here will change based based on the virtual machine, because virtual machine has a different parameters and different collection of a string which we need to supply into this particular JSON template. So this is a very simple example which I thought could be really useful for you to just get a hands-on experience on working with the JSON template of Azure ARM. Now let's jump to this Azure portal, and I would like to show you the Azure portal way or the UI way of creating the ARM template. So here in the ARM, in the portal section, you just need to type ARM, and here you will find an option deploy a custom template. Click on this particular link over here, and this will lead you to the custom deployment section. So here you have a multiple options. So here, like, create a Linux virtual machine, create a Windows virtual machine, create a web app, create a SQL database. So these are some common basic template which is provided by Azure Cloud to us for ready to consumption. So for our current example, we are going to take and create a Linux virtual machine. So click on this particular link over here, and this will help you to create your virtual machine using the ARM template. So here we need to fill in some of the details. Let's start with the first, which is resource group. So here in the drop down, here you can see I have already created a resource group, which is a demo VM resource group. Second, region. So I'm working in the North Europe, so I'm just going to select that one. Name of the virtual machine. So here I'm going to select demo VM using ARM. Since it's a demo, that's why this is the naming convention I'm using. Otherwise, you can use a proper naming convention for your virtual machine. Username. So here I'm going to put a username, which is Azure user. Then I need to select the password. So here I'm going to select one strong password over here. Second, DNS label prefix. So just keep those part. We are not interested in those right now. Just keep everything default over here. Location. So resource group location. So it is going to find that resource group location based on the resource group which we have supplied over here. After that, the virtual network name. So I have already created a virtual net. So we just need to supply the name over here. So I'm just going to copy and paste the name over here, which is the VNet. And I can also show you that VNet is already existing. So here, if you go to the virtual networks, so this is the name of my virtual net or VNet, which I need to provide while creating or deploying the virtual machine using the ARM template. All right. Second is the subnet. So if you go inside the VNet, then you will find a subnet also. So here, just copy the name of the subnet. So here is my public subnet. I'm going to copy the name, go over here and put the name of the subnet. Network security group. This is the name of that network security group. I'm just going to keep as is. And after that, security type, which is trusted launch. So I'm just going to keep and stick with the default one over here. After filling all this information, you can just click on review and create. And it is running some final validation. And after that, you just need to go ahead and click on create. Here you can verify all those details which we have just entered into the UI way of creating our custom template. And also one more thing, let me first create this particular one. And here you can see it is just starting the deployment of our Azure template. So meanwhile, it is deploying our virtual machine using the ARM template, which we have provisioned or which we have created using the UI. Here, it also gives you an option to download that ARM template. So when it is deploying right now, so at the same time, we can also click on download, and that will help us to download that particular ARM template onto our local machine, which you can see here. I have already downloaded that particular ARM template. Okay, so deployment has completed, but before we go and check our virtual machine, let's try to see the downloaded ARM template which we have just created through the UI. So here, open in the folder, and here, if you can see that this is the downloaded zip. I'm just going to extract this particular template over here. And here you can see I have extracted it, and this is the JSON file which you can see over here. There are two JSON files, one is deployment and deployment operation. But we are interested into the deployment JSON, which is our ARM template. So just right click and open it into a suitable editor which you have installed onto your system. So here, if I expand this particular editor over here, then here you can see this is our ARM template, which is generated through the UI of our Azure portal. So let's take a look. So as I told you, there are parameter sections. So here you can see the parameter section. And in the parameter section, you will find like a username, which we kept it as a Azure user. Then the password, of course, it is not visible over here because of security. And apart from that, it has also added quite a lot of other parameters like Ubuntu, also DNS label prefix, location, which is our North Europe, VM size, which is standard D2 V3. So these all are things are present into this particular ARM template. And also here you can see this is our VNet name, which we have supplied from the UI. And here is our subnet name, which we have also supplied from the UI. Along with that, the security group name. And also let's take a look onto the resource type. So here is the resource type. And when you are creating a virtual machine, it's just not that it is going to create a virtual machine. It is also going to create a lot of other resources. For example, network interfaces, because once you create a virtual machine, then it assigns an IP address, and for that you need a network interfaces associated with that virtual machine. Then security group also. So it's not only creating a virtual machine, but it is also creating these resources which is necessary for managing your virtual machine, which include network interfaces, network security group, virtual network, public IP address, because we want to have a public IP address assigned to my virtual machine. Then also the compute. Here you can see this is where our actual virtual machine is getting created, which is a virtual machine resource type, and the region is North Europe, and the extension, virtual machine extension, here also the location is North Europe. And apart from that, here are certain dependency which is depends upon, like once you create a virtual machine, then it needs to have all of these already created, which includes security group, the public IP, the VNet, the subnet, which makes sense to me also, because if you are creating a virtual machine, then you need to have a VNet already created, subnet already created, public IP if you have enabled the public IP, network interfaces. So all of these comes under this dependency and depends upon block, which tells Azure Cloud, this ARM templates tells the Azure Cloud that before completing this dependency, do not create this particular resource, which is our virtual machine. Now we have seen our Azure template or ARM template for our virtual machine. So let's get back to our Azure portal and verify our virtual machine. So here in the search box, just type virtual machine, click on this virtual machine over here. And here you can see our virtual machine has been provisioned and it is into running state. And if you take a look over here, then these are the size, which is standard D2 SV3, which we saw into ARM template, and the public IP of our virtual machine, which is assigned to this particular virtual machine. Now let's try to access this particular virtual machine using the public IP. So here, click on this particular virtual machine, and here on the connect option, you will click on connect. And here there will be an option for a native SSH through which you can SSH or login into that particular virtual machine. So click on select over here, and here it will give you a command to SSH into your virtual machine. So copy this particular command from here and go to your terminal and paste that particular command over here. And since we have assigned the username and password for our virtual machine, then we just need to modify it, and we just need to remove these parameters, because these parameters are needed if you have created the SSH keys with your virtual machine. So get rid of these parameters. We just want to SSH onto this particular virtual machine using this public IP. Click on it, type yes over here. And here it is asking for a password. So let me copy the password from my notepad and paste over here and hit enter. And here you can see that we are able to access our virtual machine, and this is the IP, which is a private IP for my virtual machine, and these are the storage and the memory usage of our virtual machine. And also if you go at the bottom, then here you can see the name and the name of our particular virtual machine, which is demo VM using ARM, and this is the username of our virtual machine. So which means that we are able to deploy our virtual machine using the ARM template. Now we have seen how to deploy a virtual machine using the ARM template from the UI. So let's delete this particular virtual machine from here. And next thing which we are going to do, we are going to deploy the same virtual machine from the command line of our Azure. So first of all, select this virtual machine and delete it. And here, just select all of these resources, because otherwise it will just your network interfaces will not be deleted, your public IP will not be deleted, and it will cost you a little bit of money. So just delete and clean everything over here, because this is just a demo machine for me. So once it is deleted, then I'm just going to show you the same JSON file or the ARM template which we have downloaded, and I will try to apply the same JSON file through the command line interface of our Azure CLI, and then we will gonna create the same virtual machine through the CLI command line. Here you can see I have opened the same downloaded JSON file, and we cannot use the whole JSON file as is for deploying through CLI. We need to do few modification to make it work. So here into this particular ARM template, you will find a template link. So just copy this particular template link from here and go to your browser. And here from here we can just download this particular template file which is prepared from Azure for us. So here you can see this is the template file which we will be using for deploying our virtual machine. So just copy all of it, and after copying it, go to your editor. In my case, I'm using the Visual Studio. So here I have already created two files inside this particular folder, which is ARM template storage account. The folder name is a bit wrong. I should have named something else. But anyway, just open this JSON template file, which is I have already created. So just remove all of the content over here and paste that template file content. And just take a look from the top if you have pasted the correct template file or not. So here you can see the parameters, username and authentication type and password. So here all of things are already available over here. So just save this particular file, and then I'm just going to show you how to use the CLI command to deploy this particular template from the CLI. All right, so open a terminal into your Visual Studio Code, or if you are using any other editor, then just open the terminal over there. Go to the folder which is ARM, and here verify the files, and you can see there are two files, storage and virtual machine. So I'm going to use the virtual machine ARM template JSON, and here I will paste the command, and I'm going to explain this particular command to you. I'll just close this. Sorry, I have closed that particular window. Let me open the terminal once again, and let's get back. Okay, so here you can see this is the command which I have pasted. So let's explain this command to you. So here AZ is the Azure CLI. So you need to install the Azure CLI onto your local laptop where you're working. Then the second keyword is the deployment. Third is the group. Then fourth is the create that will create our Azure template deployment. Then you need to specify the resource group name, which is our demo VM resource group, which you can see from our portal. Here you can see this is the resource group, and this is the resource group where we are working right now, which is demo VM resource group. Apart from that, you need to use the keyword template file and the name of the template file, which is this one, which is our virtual machine ARM JSON template. So this is how you are going to prepare your CLI command to deploy your ARM template. And after that, you just simply need to hit enter over here, and it will ask for all the parameters which we have defined. So here it will ask for your admin username. So here I'm just going to enter the name as Azure user. Second, please provide a secure string for your admin password key. So I just need to provide some strong password. So for that, I have already copied the password onto my notepad, which I'm not going to show to you. But I'll just go back to my Visual Studio Code, and here I'm just going to paste that particular password, hit enter. And hopefully it should start the deployment, or it might ask for our VNet or Subnet. But as you can see, the deployment had just started. So I'll be back once this deployment is done. And here you can see in a couple of minutes, the deployment has gone succeeded stage. And here you can see our virtual machine has been provisioned from ARM template, and we are going to verify this particular virtual machine from our portal. But these are just output onto my terminal when I executed this particular command, which you can see over here. So let's get back to our Azure portal, and here just type virtual machine. Click on this particular virtual machine, and here you can see simple Linux VM has been created for us. And here's the public IP. And although the name is simple Linux VM, because in the Azure template, if you take a look over here, then here we have kept the default value as a simple Linux VM. Although we can modify and put your custom value, but since I have not replaced this value, that's why the name of the machine is simple Linux VM. And this is how I have created my simple virtual machine using the Azure template, which I have just created through the sample template provided by the Azure cloud. And also you can reuse this particular template. I'll put this particular template link into the description section, so feel free to use that particular template for your own custom project or custom work. In this chapter, we are going to talk about the Terraform and how we can use the Terraform to set up a virtual machine in Azure cloud. When we talk about the Terraform, then we are talking about the infrastructure as a code, because in industry, when you will start working, then you are going to use the Terraform as a preferred tool for provisioning the infrastructure on a Azure cloud. And why do we use Terraform? Because with the help of Terraform, you can write the code, and with that code, you can just provision the infrastructure. And virtual machine is going to be one example, but Terraform is so powerful that you can not only provision the virtual machine, you can also provision the storage, you can also provision the other services of Azure cloud. So it pretty much gives you the power to provision any kind of a resource onto the Azure cloud. But let's start with Terraform, and let's try to understand what are the basic thing which we need to set up our Terraform infrastructure, and how we can set up our first virtual machine with the help of Terraform. Here you can see onto the screen on the left hand side, I have just written a code over here, and this is the code of our Terraform infrastructure as a code, where I'm telling it to provision a virtual machine, which you can see over here. So this is the resource name. So whenever we write a Terraform code, then we need to create a resources, and that's where we use this resource block. And since we are talking about the Azure, then we need to specify the Azure resource. So here, this is the name of my Azure resource. So here we are provisioning, or we are setting up a virtual machine. So that's the name of our Azure resource, which we want to set up on a Azure cloud. But apart from that, if you're working on setting up storage account, storage like a blob storage, then you need to change those resources based on the need. But let's keep the things very simple over here. So we are going to set up this virtual machine, and this virtual machine we are going to set up through infrastructure as a code. And don't worry, this code I'm going to explain to you line by line, but this is just an example, and this is the screenshot which I have taken from my code, so that you feel a little bit more comfortable that what is coming in the next few minutes. But before we jump into the Terraform code, let's try to understand what are the components which we need to build this particular virtual machine. So this is our virtual machine, and consider this virtual machine as your personal CPU or personal computer, which you need to assemble. This is just an analogy I'm putting, but this is the simplest analogy through which I can explain. So this is your personal machine which you want to assemble. So whenever you're assembling a virtual, your personal machine or personal CPU, then what are the things you will need? So first of all, you will need a disk. Then after that, you will need a network interface through which you can plug in your Ethernet or a LAN cable so that you can have access to internet. Then you will need an operating system, which can be Linux, which can be Windows. So, but here, since we are talking about the Azure cloud, so I'm going to choose Linux as my preferred operating system, which I will install onto my virtual machine. And the third thing is the network security group. Although If you're configuring your personal machine, then you don't need it. But since we are talking about the Azure cloud, then I would like to give you a little bit more explanation on the network security group. So network security group is just different ports which you allow for inbound and outbound traffic for your computer or virtual machine. So if you configure a network security group, then you are dictating to your virtual machine, in this current example, or you consider it as a personal machine, then you are dictating that, hey, I am allowing this kind of a traffic to come in onto this particular port. So here, for example, that I have specified port 22. So you are telling that particular port 22 is allowed for some kind of a traffic. It can be inbound traffic, it can be outbound traffic. So that's just one thing which you also need to consider. So these are the few components which are really important to set up your virtual machine. And now I will jump into the Terraform code and I will start explaining all of these components one by one and how I am going to build my Terraform code to set up my first virtual machine on Azure cloud. Alright, so here is my editor. I'm using IntelliJ, but if you are using Visual Studio, that also fine. It doesn't matter that much. So here is my editor, code editor, where I will be writing my Terraform code. So let's start by a component which I have just explained to you. So here onto the screen, which you can see that I need to set up a virtual machine. So this is going to be my first resource, which you can see over here. After that, I have explained to you that we need a network interface card. And if I could show you, not this one. Sorry. Yeah, this is the one. So here, this is the network interface card which we need. So for that, I have created a network interface card resource over here, which you can see. And once you create a network interface card in your virtual machine, then you will need a public IP or a private IP. But here in my case, I will be using the public IP because I want to access that virtual machine from my personal laptop, which is not sitting into my Azure cloud. So that's the reason I will be using the public IP resource over here. And apart from that, I have already explained to you the network security group. And if I could show to my slide, so this is the one which I'm talking about. This is the port 22 and network security group. All right, I'll just undo this so that these arrows doesn't confuse you. So here you can see this is the network security group which I have created for this particular resource. And after that, once you create a network security group, then you need to associate. I mean to say, you just need to tell the network interface card, hey, this is the security group which you also need to take care. Because if I compare with the real-time objects or real-time machine, then consider this as your personal machine, which you need to configure. And to get the access to internet, you will put in your network interface card. Once you put in your network interface card and once you plug in your LAN cable, then you are gonna get a public IP. And once you get a public IP, which you can see over here through this resource, then also you need to make sure that which port on which you are allowing the traffic. So this is the network security group which dictates which port you are allowing the traffic. But you also need to associate this with your network and interface card. Otherwise, your virtual machine, or in the hypothetical example, your CPU or your personal machine will not know which traffic to allow or which traffic to deny. So that's why network interface card, public IP, and inbound and outbound traffic are associated with each other. So I have given you a very high level overview of how many resources which we are gonna create. But also I will expand these resources and we are gonna take a look onto each line and try to understand this particular Terraform code. And if you are wondering that how to download this Terraform code, then I have already created this GitHub repository which is available for you guys. So I will put the link of this particular GitHub repository into the description section, and here you will find a Azure Virtual Machine, that particular folder in which I have created all of these resources. So just download and clone this particular GitHub repo and start using and playing around with it. And also there is some networking component, but at this point of a time, let's focus on the virtual machine, and I will cover the networking component later with the Terraform. Okay. So moving forward, I will get back to my editor. So here, the first resource is our Linux machine. So the thing which we need to specify over here is the name. What is the name of the resource? So this is the name of my virtual machine, which I have kept it. Resource group. So if I show you, I would like to show you one diagram to you. So here, this is my Azure cloud, and in any Azure cloud, if you're working, then you need to create a resource group so that you can have a logical segregation of the resources. So that's why we create a resource group over here. And once you create a resource group, then you need to create your VNet. And that VNet is your VPC, which is the CIDR range in which you are going to provision the resource. So here, if you see in the code, then this is the resource group I'm talking about, where we will be creating our resource, and this is the resource group we will be using for other components as well. And that resource group has been created. If you take a look over here, click on here, then this is the name of my resource group, which is dev EU North RG. That is the resource group, and this resource group is present into this particular Terraform code over here. Okay. Now let's get back to the main.tf. So I have explained to you the resource group, the location, which is also available from here, which you can see the location, which is North Europe, where I'm deploying. So here, name of the virtual machine, resource group name, resource group location, the size. This is standard F2 I am using. This is the standard which is given by Azure Cloud. So this is not something which I am coming up. It is just a standard definition which I am using. Second, the username. What is the username you want to associate with your Azure virtual machine? So that is, I have kept it my name. Secondly, I was experimenting, so I was using my own password, but keep in mind it is a bad practice to use or to hard code a password into a Terraform file. So I always discourage this practice. Instead of that, you need to use the public and the private key, which I can show you and I can explain to you a bit over here. So if I take a look onto this particular diagram over here, then when you create your virtual machine in Azure Cloud, then you need to associate the SSH key pair, and you need to create the key pair for your virtual machine. What does it mean? So whenever we talk about the SSH keys, then there are two keys to this whole setup. One is public key, one is your private key. So here in the diagram, you can see this is the key which is in red color. I am denoting it is your private key. It is super secret. You have to keep it with yourself. You cannot share with anyone. And there is a public key. So this public key you can share where you want to access that resource. And that resource is this virtual machine. To access this virtual machine, you need to put your public SSH key inside this particular virtual machine. And the private key, you will keep it for yourself over here. So this is how this SSH key mechanism work, and with the help of this mechanism, you don't need to associate any password or you need to remember any password. You will always use this private key to access this particular virtual machine from your local laptop, and this private key will always be available onto your laptop. Now, as I told you that we need to associate our public key with the virtual machine. So here you will see this is the location where I have created my public key, and this public key is getting associated with this particular virtual machine which I want to create. So this is the public key which you will be using to associate, and you will keep the private key with yourself. We are going to use the private key later on when we will try to log in. So at that point of a time, I'm going to show you the private key as well. And you might be wondering that how to create this key, the SSH key pair. So for that, I'm just going to open the terminal. So here, this is the terminal. And if you are using your Windows system, right now I'm using Mac, but if you have your Windows system, then I would highly encourage you to use WSL, which provides you a sub Linux system onto your Windows machine, and through which you should be able to get this terminal. Otherwise, you can also use putty or keygen. I think you can use the putty also on your Windows machine. That will also help you to get this particular terminal. Okay, so I'm assuming that you have set up your terminal, and the next thing which you need to do is you need to specify the command SSH keygen, and this will help you to create your key, which will contain public as well as private key. So if you hit enter over here, then it will ask at which location you want to create this particular key. So what you can do, you can just copy this particular path, and let's say I will go till this particular path. you just need to paste the path and then you need to type in the name of the key. So I'm just gonna put demo SSH key for Azure and then hit enter, and it will ask do you want to encrypt with the password, not encrypt, but you want to put any password for that particular file. So if you really want, then you can put it, otherwise I will just skip it. And here it has generated the public key and private key, and which you can verify. Like if you go to this particular path, I'll copy this path, and if you do the last over here onto this particular path, then you will see this key. This is your private key and this is your public key. So these are the two keys which has been generated, and this particular key, which is the public key, I will just extend this a bit over here. So here you can see, so this is the key, this is one is private and this one is public because it is ending with a .pub extension. So this public key we are going to associate with our Terraform code so that it get attached to our public virtual machine, and this is your private key which you will keep it for yourself. So I just shown you like how to create this particular public key and private key. I have already generated these keys and I have already I'm going to associate this public key with my virtual machine. Okay, so that is about how you will set up your username and how you will associate your public and private key so that you can access your virtual machine using those. So that is the most secured way of creating a virtual machine and accessing the virtual machine. Okay. Next, as I already told you, network interface ID. So here we need to specify the network interface ID card resource. So here you will see this is the reference I have taken. And if you click on this one, then it will take you to the network interface card over here. So this is how the reference is made to another Terraform resource. So your virtual machine is dependent on the network interface card. So you need to tell that, hey, this is the resource which is creating the network interface card, and that network interface card resource is this one. This you can see very easily over here. Okay, I'm going to explain the network interface card, but this is the dependency you specify. Second is the disk, which I have already told you. So this is the disk, which is a read-write disk, and the account type for this particular disk is standard LRS. And I think the default size you will get for this particular virtual machine is 30 GB or 30 gigs for your virtual machine, which you can increase also if you refer to Terraform documentation from Azure. Next is the image. So I already told you that we need to associate operating system image. So here I'm gonna tell that, hey, I want to use the Canonical, the company which maintains the Ubuntu. And here this is the version or the operating system name which I'm specifying. This is the SKU and this is the version. So SKU means that this is the long-term release I'm using, 22.04, but if they have made any patches, then I'm just gonna use their latest patched version of 22.04. So this is how I specify my virtual machine which I want to use along with my preferred operating system which I need to have onto my virtual machine. Moving further, the next resource which I told you that we are gonna take a look about the Azure Network Interface Card. So this is the name of the resource. This is the name, the custom name which I have put for this particular resource over here. This is the name of the resource which will be visible onto our Azure portal. So don't get confused. This is only the Terraform resource name which is applicable within this particular Terraform code repository. It has nothing to do with the UI when this resource is provisioned. This name will be visible when this resource is provisioned onto the Azure portal. Again, the resource group location, the resource group location and the resource group name which you need to put in over here, the same way I have put it over here. This is, you can see location, the resource group name, and this is the location. Then after that, the IP configuration. Since it is your network interface card, so you need to tell you need to have a public IP or private IP. In my case, I'm taking both. So I will have private IP as well as the public IP. If you see, the name is internal, the subnet ID. Also, you keep in mind that this particular resource is getting deployed within a certain subnet. So we need to associate this subnet ID as well. So here I have created this particular subnet, and the range of this particular subnet is this 10.0.1.0. If you are getting or if you are having some difficulty understanding the concept of this subnet and VPC or VNet, then I would recommend to follow the chapter 1 and 2, I think, where I have explained the VPC subnet, how to associate your resources. So those are really good chapters to understand from the networking series of Azure. So keep in mind, I have a Azure Zero to Hero course and I have a Azure networking course. So in the networking course, I have really explained all of these concepts. I'll put those video link into the description section. So feel free to have a look if you are getting struggle with the VNet, Subnet and IP ranges. Okay. But okay, so what I'll do, I'll just explain the concept in a very brief. So here you can see the Azure, the resource group, which we created and we mentioned in our Terraform code, and the resource group has a location, which is our Europe North. Then this is our VNet, or which we also call it as a VPC. This is a bigger CIDR range, and inside that we have a public subnet and private subnet. And in the public subnet and private subnet, we will have a route table and network security group. And here we are gonna provision our virtual machine, which you can see. So we need to tell that, hey, I will be using this particular subnet for provisioning of this virtual machine. So we are setting up this virtual machine right now. And when you want to set up this virtual machine, then you need to tell the VNet, you also need to tell the resource group, and also you need to tell the not IP address, but at least these are the things which you need to specify for this virtual machine. Okay, let's get back. And so this is how you are going to associate the subnet ID. Apart from that, the private IP. So when you create a virtual machine, then you get a private IP, and that private IP you will get from this CIDR range, because this is the CIDR range which is only visible within this particular VNet or within this resource group or within your Azure cloud account. So you are going to specify over here that, hey, this is your dynamic IP for this particular private IP. Then also you're going to tell that, hey, I also need a public IP for my virtual machine. And for that, you're going to create a public static IP resource over here. So if you click over here, then you will find this is the resource which I will be using for public IP. In Terraform, nothing happens automatically. You need to specify each and everything which you need for your resource. In my case, this is virtual machine, and for this virtual machine, I also need a public IP. So that's why I created one more resource, name of the resource, name of the public IP, which will be visible in the portal. Again, the resource group name, resource group location, and the allocation method. So this will be static public IP, which means if I destroy my particular machine, if I release this IP, then I will not be able to get back this particular IP. For that, you need to reserve this IP for a long time. Okay. And moving forward, let's take a look on to the one more thing over here is the depends upon block, which I will explain later. So now we have covered the network interface card. We have covered the public IP. The next thing is the network security group. So if you take a look onto this diagram, then I'm talking about this network security group, which is like defining a port, which is right now is 22, which will tell that, hey, if anyone trying to access on this particular port, which is going to be our SSH, if someone is going to SSH into this particular machine, then the port is 22, and this 22 port should be allowed by network security group so that anyone can access this particular virtual machine. So this is how it works. So for that, we have created this particular network security group, which is this one. And in that network security group, we have specified the port, which is 22. The protocol is TCP, and the access is allowed and the direction is inbound, so that anyone from outside can easily access that particular virtual machine, and that is going to be your inbound traffic. Apart from that, here is the tag and environment. If it is just an optional thing, if you want to keep it, then you can keep it to your virtual machine. And finally, it comes to the association. So I have already told you that we need to associate this particular network security group with our network interface ID. So here, this is the association resource you need to specify. So here you're going to tell that this is the network interface ID, which you can see, which I have created over here. This is the one which I have explained to you. So you need to tell this particular resource needs to be associated with this one, which is this particular network resource group, which has a inbound port 22 allowed. So you need to associate this one with your network interface ID, which is this one over here. All right, so this is the association which we have done over here, and that's how it knows that this is the network interface ID, this is the network security group which is allowed onto this particular network interface ID for this particular virtual machine. And finally, the depends upon block. So the network interface ID resource has a dependency onto the network security group as well as the public IP. If you don't get these things, we will not be able to create this particular network interface card. So for that, we need to define the dependency onto these two blocks. So it is in a very simple term, I can say that, hey, if I am dependent on these first two steps, then I cannot do my third step. So for that, I need to define a dependency. Hey, please complete step number 1, step number 2, and then I will create a step number 3. So here the step number 3 is the network interface card. And the step number 1 and 2 could be your network security group and your public IP. So that's how this whole dependency works for this particular use case of virtual machine. Okay, so now I have given you the walkthrough of this particular Terraform code and how it is going to provision the resource group and virtual machine and the VNet and Subnet which are required for this particular virtual machine. But before we provision, I would like to show you my Azure portal. So this is my Azure portal over here, and if you go to resource group, then here you can see there is a one predefined resource group which is network watcher RG. And if you take a look onto our code, then our resource group name is dev EU North RG, which is the name of the resource group, and the virtual machine name is our dev EU North Ubuntu 2020-04 virtual machine. So if you take a look over here, then you will not find this particular virtual machine over here. There's nothing, no virtual machine has been provisioned. So let's go to our Terraform code, go to our terminal, and here let's check if you have the files visible. So yes, my files are visible over here. So first command which I would like to run is terraform init over here. After that, the second command which I would like to run is terraform plan, which will tell that how many resources we are planning to create. And it might take a minute or so, so just be patient with the output. Here you can see there are around 10 resources which it is planning to create. And the next command which I'm going to run is terraform apply. Hit enter. And then it will start creating all the resources, and it will create a resource group, it will create a VNet, Subnet, and the virtual machine at last. Here it is asking for confirmation, so I'm going to type yes over here. And it will take a couple of minutes. So I'll be back once this whole provisioning is completed. So here you can see it has started creating all of those resources right now. So I'll be back once this whole provisioning is completed. As you can see, our provisioning has been completed and apply has been completed, and it is green right now. So let's go to our Azure portal over here, and I will just start from the resource group. So here you can see our resource group has been created. Let's take a look onto the virtual machine. So I'll go to the virtual machine, click on the virtual machine, and here you can see our virtual machine is also created. And we also got the public IP, which you can see. The size is standard F2, the operating system is Linux, and we can also verify a few more things after going into that particular virtual machine. So here you can see there are other details which are available, which is our private IP. And also in the network setting, if you go over here, then you will find the network security group, which is allowing the port 22 for this particular virtual machine. All right, so now our virtual machine has been created, and this is our network interface card, which I was telling you about. So this is the network interface card, which is also associated with my virtual machine. Now let's take a look on like how we can connect to this particular virtual machine. So here, click on connect over here, and then we are going to use the native SSH option to connect to our virtual machine. Select on this one, and here you will find a command. And if you're following this particular series or the whole chapter, then you might have seen this kind of a command I have used in the past. But if you haven't seen it, then don't worry, I'm going to show you again. Copy this particular command from here, and then we are going to jump into our terminal to SSH into our virtual machine using the private key. Here is my terminal, and let's first check that I have the public key and private key present into my local laptop or not. But for this particular demo, I will need a private key. So I will run a command ls, and after that I'm going to run the command grep, and I'm going to mention the name of the file, which is this one. Here you can see I have the private key as well as public key available onto my laptop, but I will gonna use this particular private key to SSH into this particular machine. Keep in mind also that you only need to provide the read-only permission for this particular private key. Otherwise, you will not be able to do the SSH, which you can verify from the command ls lart, and I'm gonna use the same grep dev VM. And here you can see it only has it has a read and write permission, so I need to change this one. So for that I'm going to use chmod 400, and then I'm going to specify the VM, and now it only has a read only permission. So now we are ready to SSH into our virtual machine. So now we need to copy this particular command from here, go to our terminal, clear this screen, paste the command, and here we need to remove this. This is your private key part, so you need to remove this one and mention your key which is available onto your laptop. Right now the key name is dev VM SSH key pair. After that you need to hit enter. It is asking for a connection, so type yes. And here you can see we are able to access our virtual machine, which is this one. And here you will verify a few details, which is the private IP, which is 10.0.1.4. And that matches with our overview section. If you go over here and if you go further down, then here you can see the private IP. So now you have seen like how you can use the Terraform code to provision your virtual machine, which is going to be your first virtual machine if you just started working with the Azure. And this is the repository which will help you to get more understanding and more grasp on using Terraform with your Azure cloud. Sorry for taking a pause over here, but if you're really liking these kind of a content from me, then please consider subscribing to this channel. And there is also a membership program which I'm running, which is only exclusive for this YouTube member, which you can also find into the description section, which is a YouTube membership program. So there are certain topics and chapter which I only publish for those members. So if you really want to learn the AWS, Azure, and soon there will be Google Cloud, then please consider subscribing to the membership as well as to my channel. That will really help me to keep me posting such kind of a content for you guys. Let's get back to the topic. And once you have verified everything and you're done with your demo, then what you can do, you can just destroy everything. And for that you need to use the command terraform destroy from the terminal, and then hit enter, and it will remove all the resources which you have created so far. And if you are doing it for the learning purpose, then I would highly encourage to destroy all the resources so that you can have a minimum cost onto your invoices. So here I have just issued the terraform destroy command, and it is asking for the confirmation. I'm going to type yes, and then it will destroy all of those resources. So this is how I provision a virtual machine with the help of Terraform onto my Azure cloud. Let's talk about the network security group in Azure Virtual Machine. And this network security group is really an important concept when it's come to the security of inbound and outbound traffic coming to our Azure Virtual Machine. Let's take a very simple example to understand this whole concept of a network security group. Here onto the screen, you can see this is the user which wants to access this particular virtual machine running on Azure cloud. And this machine is a Linux machine which is having the Linux image installed into this particular virtual machine. But to access that particular virtual machine, it needs to have a certain ports which needs to be opened. So for standard Linux machine, the standard port which is used for accessing that virtual machine or to SSH into that particular virtual machine is 22. So here, this is the port which needs to be opened to access this particular virtual machine. So if a user is planning to access that particular virtual machine, and in that case, if it is a Linux machine, then this particular port needs to be open. And this particular port which I'm talking about is 22. It needs to be configured into the network security group to allow the inbound traffic. What do you mean by the inbound traffic? So this particular user is trying to request this particular machine. So this is an incoming request, so which can be called it as an inbound traffic. So the network security group will help us to set up this port, which is port 22, so that a user can access this particular virtual machine. And as of now, I have just taken an example of our Linux machine. But if you are provisioning an Windows machine, then this port will change. And instead of 22, it should be 3389. And there we will use RDP protocol, because that's where those are the standard protocol for accessing the Windows machine. So that's the two key differences when it comes to accessing the virtual machine, if it's a Linux machine and if it's a Windows machine. Alright, so now I have just explained to you like why the network security groups are so important when you're trying to access a virtual machine. But the concept of a network security group is not only applicable for accessing your virtual machine, whether it can be Linux or Windows, but it is also applicable for certain packages which are running onto your virtual machine. For example, this is the Apache 2 package which I have installed onto this particular virtual machine. So this Apache package is running fine onto this particular virtual machine. But if someone like me who wants to access this Apache package which is running into this virtual machine, then I need to define a port for that particular software package, which is Apache 2 over here. So for that also we need to configure a network security group so that we allow the port 80 for this particular software package, which is Apache 2. If we don't allow or we don't create a network security group to allow the port 80, then we will not be able to access that particular service outside of that particular virtual machine. So these are the few examples which I can come up, and don't worry, we are gonna see both of it into the demo so that it will make more sense for you that how it works in reality. But in a nutshell, if you are trying to install any packages or any services, and if those services are running on a specific port, then you need to have network security group configured into your Azure virtual machine for that particular port. So let's start with the SSH, and we will first see how I have configured the network security group for port 22, which is our SSH protocol for accessing the virtual machine. So this is my Azure portal, and here if you go and type virtual machines, then you will see I have already created a virtual machine. So this is the virtual machine which I am planning to test it out for a network security group. So access this virtual machine by clicking on this particular virtual machine which I have provisioned. And here in the networking section, if I collapse all of it, then here these are the settings which you will find for your virtual machine. And go to the networking setting, go to network settings over here. And here you will find the settings which is allowing you to create the network security group. So here you can see this is the network security group, and here in this particular network security group I have already configured the SSH port 22 and the protocol is TCP. So if you click on this particular SSH, then you will see like how I have configured this particular network security group for this particular virtual machine. So here source any, which means like if I take a look onto this particular diagram, so any means this is the source. So this source can be any user in the world. If this particular virtual machine is a public virtual machine, then any user in the world can access that particular virtual machine. So that's why the source is any. Port ranges, so here I have put a star, and in the destination also I have put a star. I'm not setting any specific source and destination because user will know the public IP of this particular virtual machine. So with the help of public IP, user will try to access that particular virtual machine. And in the service, I have specified SSH because that's the protocol which is standard for accessing the Linux virtual machine. And here you can see the RDP also, which is used for Windows. So if you are provisioning a Windows machine or setting up a Windows machine, then use the RDP. And as soon as you will change, then port will automatically change over here to 3389. But anyway, we are on to Linux machine. So this is SSH and the port default port is 22. and rest of the things are like you can keep as is, and this is the priority. So let me give you a little brief on the priority. So for a particular virtual machine, there can be more than one network security group. And if there are more than one security group, then you can assign the priority rules for those network security group, that which network security group has the highest priority. And based on those priority, those network security groups will be evaluated for that particular virtual machine. Okay, so now you know little bit about this network security group, and here you can see we have already configured the SSH on a port 22. So let me cancel this one because I don't want to save anything over here, and let's check. Yeah, so here you can see this is the only rule which I have configured to allow on a port 22. So let's test this particular thing. So for that, what you need, just go to overview section, and here you need to copy the public IP, go to your terminal, and here we need to SSH into this particular machine. So for that, what you need is, let me check if I have used that particular command. So SSH I, then you need to specify the key. Sorry, if you have not followed this particular, like how to create SSH keys and public key and private key, then please refer to the previous chapter where I have already configured this particular SSH key for virtual machine. After that, you need to enter the username. So here the username is this, and followed by the public IP, which I have just copied from the Azure portal of my virtual machine, and then hit enter. And here you can see we are able to access this particular virtual machine, and the private IP address is 10.0.1.4, which you can verify from here. It should be somewhere into the networking or overview section. So this is your public IP and this is your private IP, which you can see. So this particular port is allowing you to access that particular virtual machine on a port 22. So let's do one more one more demo, not demo, but one more use case, that I will try to remove this particular network security group, and then we will see like whether we are allowed to access this particular virtual machine or not. So for that, what I will do, I will just go to the network setting, and here into this particular network security group, click on this one. And here, let's see if I can delete this particular network security group from here. To delete this particular network security group, what you need to do, you just need to click on this network security group name, which you can see over here. And here in the settings section of that particular network security group, you will find the inbound security rule. So click on this particular inbound security rule, and here you can see the same rule which we have defined for port 22 for SSH. Select this particular rule and click on delete over here, and select yes over here. And that will delete that particular security group rule for our inbound traffic. And now this has been deleted. So let's wait for a minute or so and then try to access our virtual machine using the SSH command, and then see if it is allowing us to access that particular virtual machine or not. Alright, so this is my terminal, and here I'm just gonna use the same command which I have used previously to access my virtual machine. So this is the SSH, this is my private key, this is the username, and the same IP address, which is the public IP address, and then hit enter over here. And here you can see it is taking time, and eventually this particular command will time out. So after removing this particular security group, which you can see I'm not able to access that particular virtual machine, which means that all the inbound traffic on that particular port, which is 22, is restricted for this particular virtual machine. So this is how you can set up your network security group to allow or disable some of the inbound traffic. Next, we are gonna see one more example where we are gonna set up a Apache 2 server and try to install that Apache 2 server and try to access that Apache 2 server on a port 80. Alright, so before we install the Apache, I have just enabled the same network security group so that I can access that particular virtual machine. So let's get back to our terminal and run the command so that we can access it. And here you can see we are able to access after enabling that inbound security group rule. Let's clear the screen and let me copy the command to install the Apache. So first of all, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to update the package manager over here. So let's update the package manager. And this is just an example to install the Apache, but in your case, you can experiment with any other packages which you feel suitable for your virtual machine. And that can be any kind of a packages which you want to install and run onto your virtual machine. So for this example, I'm taking Apache 2. So it should be quite quick and quite simple to understand it. So I have updated the package manager. So let's install the Apache, and this is the command for installing the Apache. Hit enter, type yes to install it. And it will take a minute or so to install this particular Apache, and I'll post the instruction or the script for installing the Apache into the description section into my GitHub repository. So from there you can just copy all of these instructions, or also you can find a link of the blog post where I have already documented all of these instructions, so you can just follow those instructions from the blog post as well. So here you can see it is still in progress, so just wait for a minute or so and then it will be installed. So what I'll do, I'll be back once this whole installation is done. I think it's pretty much done over here. So let's clear the screen, and what I'll do, I'll just try to restart the Apache. So for that, the command is sudo systemctl restart Apache. Okay, so Apache service is not found. I'll just try to do if it has already started or not. So just try to do the local host on port 80. And here you can see this is the output I'm seeing. So I don't need to restart the Apache. It is already started when I installed the Apache service. So this is the basic HTML page which I have rendered when I'm try to install that particular Apache onto my Linux machine. So which you can see, this is the whole HTML document. Since I'm doing the curl, so this is just putting the HTML code over here, but when we'll try to access on a browser, then it will be very useful to see, and you will not see all of these HTML code over there. So here you can see I am inside the virtual machine and I can access this particular Apache homepage. But the same thing will not be accessible for me when I try to access through my public IP, which I'm going to show to you. So here is my virtual machine. So open this particular virtual machine. And in this particular virtual machine, let's try to copy this particular IP address. Copy it, go to the tab, and here try to use it with the port 80 and try to access it. So 80 is the default port for HTTP traffic. So as soon as you put 80 over here, so it will just remove the port 80 and it will give you the IP address of that particular virtual machine. And here you can see it is still loading. It has not able to access that particular Apache 2 because we have not set the port 80, and here you can see the connection has timed out. So if you take a look onto the network security group, then we have not configured the port 80 for that particular network security group for Apache 2. So that's the reason we are not able to access that particular Apache 2 from outside of the Azure cloud. But when we are inside the Azure virtual machine, then we are able to access, because right now we are sitting inside the virtual machine and that Apache service is local to that particular virtual machine. That's why we were able to see the output. So how to configure this particular network security group? So for that, go to network security group, and the same network security group which I have told you, click on add over here. And here source any, destination should keep it any. The only thing which you need to change is the custom to change it to HTTP, because we are sending an HTTP request towards our virtual machine, and that is port 80. And in case if it is not running on a port 80 and it is running on some other port, then just use the option custom over here, and with the help of custom you can change this port whatever you need. So that is one tip for you. But anyway, let's click HTTP and then click on add over here, and it will add one more inbound security group rule for your virtual machine, which you can see over here. This is port 80. Now, once you configured this particular network security group, then it will take a little bit of 30 to 60 seconds delay to get into effect. So I'll wait and I'll come back once this security group is active, and we'll try to access the home page of our Apache 2. All right, so now I have waited for a little bit 30 seconds or 60 seconds since it is a very like a small change which I did for network security group. So let's get back to the same page, and here you can see the previously this has timed out. So let's try to refresh this page over here with the port 80. And here you can see we are able to access the home page of our Apache 2. So this was like a small demo, like how you can configure your network security group and you can allow inbound traffic. And there is also same concepts applicable for outbound traffic as well. But in most of the cases, you will end up modifying your inbound traffic onto the virtual machine using the network security group. Moving to the next topic about the Azure Virtual Machine custom data and user data. Both are similar concept, but we need to understand what is those and why we need to use them when we are configuring our virtual machine onto the Azure cloud. All right, so let's try to take a very simple example for our Azure Virtual Machine. So there is a user like me who wants to set up a virtual machine on a virtual cloud, which is this one. And this virtual machine, when it needs to set up for the first time, I need to install certain packages into this particular virtual machine. So for example, if another developer or another end user trying to access that virtual machine, then those packages are already installed onto that particular virtual machine, so that that particular user or end user doesn't have to run or play around with that particular virtual machine to install those certain packages. And a simplest example for that is like if you buy a Windows laptop with you, then you also get a pre-installed software, for example, Chrome, Internet Edge. So these are the certain software which are pre-installed onto that particular Windows laptop. So in a similar fashion, when we are working with the virtual cloud virtual machine in the Azure cloud, then we need to have those kind of a virtual machines with a pre-installed packages. And to achieve that, we need to rely on the custom data and the user data. So these are the two concepts which are very similar in the behavior and implementation, but there are some key distinct differences between the custom data and user data, which we will take care later. But at this point of a time, if you need to install anything on a boot time or any initial phase, then you will use the custom data and user data to configure those scripts to be installed onto that particular virtual machine. So here is an example. So this is the script which I need to perform or which I need to install onto the virtual machine. So with the help of custom data and user data, I will configure this particular script, and with the help of this script, I will be able to initiate or set up my first virtual machine. So that's the main purpose of our custom data and user data. And here is the official definition of a user data from the Azure website. So here you can see it is the set of script or other metadata that inserted on an Azure virtual machine at the provision time. And at the provision time, which means at the starting of that particular virtual machine when you are trying to set it up for the first time. And here is the key difference between the custom data and the user data. But before we jump into the custom data and user data, let's try to see a demo where we will first configure a user data for our virtual machine to install certain packages. For this case, I'm going to take a Apache 2 package to be installed onto that particular virtual machine. So here onto the Azure portal, I'll go to the virtual machine, just type the virtual machine. Click on this particular virtual machine, and here we are going to set up a new virtual machine. So click on create a new Azure virtual machine over here, and it will take you to the portal where we can create our first virtual machine used for user data. Sorry, I just clicked on other one. So here we need to select the resource group. So I'm going to use dev EU North resource group, virtual machine name. So I will put a demo user data VM. Region is Europe North. Availability zone, I'm keeping it default, and the image type I'm using Ubuntu over here, but the same concepts applies for the Windows virtual machine as well. Only that one part will change. This is a Linux machine, so I will be using the bash script, which is suitable for Linux machine. But if you are using a Windows machine, then you need to choose the script type based on the Windows virtual machine, which can be your PowerShell also. So just bear in mind, the same concepts are also applicable for a Windows machine as well. Okay, so I'm going with the default options over here. So size and everything is default. So access type. So here I will choose the SSH key, and I already have a SSH key, so I will not generate it, but I will use the existing public key, and I'll paste the public key over here. And inbound port 22, which is fine, and click next over here. And here we will see all of the other things like OS disk. So this is 30 gigs, which is also fine. Click forward and then click on networking. Here in the networking section, everything is default. I'm not changing anything. The only thing is I will need a public IP for virtual machine to access it to verify the user data. And apart from that, I'm not changing anything. Click on next management over here. I'm not changing anything into the management. Click next monitoring, which is also fine. Then click next onto advanced section. So this advanced section is where we are gonna put our custom data or a user data. So here you can see this is the custom data section and this is the user data section. So let's take a look onto the custom data. And I already told you custom data and user data are similar thing. There are minor difference which we will cover later, but in a nutshell, both work in the same way. All right, so here I will insert the script for installing the Apache as a part of my pre-installed package onto this particular virtual machine. So paste the command over here. So this is the bash scripting. We are updating the package manager, then we are installing the Apache 2, and here we are just trying to update the home page of that particular Apache 2, and then I'm trying to restart the Apache virtual machine. So what I'll do, I'll keep the restart. Okay, let's keep the restart command over here. And after that, click next to the tags. So since we are performing the demo on user data and custom data, so I will skip the tags and then click on review and create. And after that, I will just go and click on create over here. And keep in mind that this particular user data or the custom data which I have updated will be installing the Apache 2 onto our Linux machine. And to access that particular Linux machine, to access the homepage of Apache 2, we need to set the network security group on a port 80 as well, because right now we only enabled the network security group on a port 22, which will not allow us to access the Apache 2. But that we will verify once the virtual machine is up and running. So right now you can see our virtual machine is up and running. So click on go to resource, and here you can see this is the public IP which we got for our virtual machine. So using this public IP, we will try to access our virtual machine and try to verify that, hey, we have able to install the Apache 2 as a part of our custom data script. And here we have already copied the public IP from here, and let's get back to terminal and paste the public IP over here. Hit enter, type yes to connect. I think there is some problem. I'll check. The problem was I have not updated the username. So previously I was using the name as Rahul Wag for that particular virtual machine, but while provisioning that particular virtual machine, I forgot to change the name. So instead of that, I need to use the Azure user, because that's the default name got assigned to my public for this particular virtual machine. But let's recheck, and here this is the public IP which you can see, which is ending with .82, and which is the same public IP I'm using over here. So hit enter over here, and now it should be able to connect. So here you can see I'm able to access that particular virtual machine. This is the public IP. This is not a public IP. I should verify from the private IP. So here you can see this is the private IP 10.0.1.5, and hopefully it should be the same over here. Let me check. And here you can see this is the private IP which you can see. So we are accessing the same virtual machine over here. Now we need to verify our Apache 2, which we have set up as a custom data into our virtual machine. So for that, what we need to do, we just need to access the home page and verify that particular package has been installed or not. So for that, I will do curl localhost on a port 80, hit enter, and here you can see this is the home page message which I got. So this is the same message which I have written, is like a demo user data VM with the IP address which is 10.10.1.5. and if I show you my script over here too, then let me copy this particular notepad here. So here you can see, so this was the script and this was the home page update which I have done. So here you can see the host name and the IP address, which is the text which you can see, which is visible over here. Yeah, here you can see this is the host name and this is the IP address. So same thing got updated onto the home page of that particular virtual machine. Next thing, I have not set up the network security group on a port 80, so I will not be able to access that particular Apache homepage from my browser because I am sitting outside of that particular virtual machine from my local laptop. So here you can see it is not able to access that particular homepage of our Apache 2, which we have just installed as a part of custom data. So for that, go to virtual machine, go to network setting, and here into the network security group, just click on this network security group, and here go to inbound security rules over here, click on add, and here the service type we need is HTTP on a port 80. And after that, click on add over here, and that will allow the inbound traffic on a port 80 so that we can access our Apache 2 service. So now I have updated this particular rule, and it might take a minute or so to get into effect, and I'll be back once this is up and running. So after a minute or so, my rules are into effect. I'll just hit the enter, and here you can see the home page, which is my custom home page, which I put as a part of a custom data script, which I have just set up for my virtual machine, and I can see the private IP address. So this is how you configure your custom data and user data when you're trying to pre-install certain packages onto your virtual machine. Now, as I told you previously that there are key differences between the user data and the custom data, but the concept is still the same. What are those key differences and when you should use custom data and the user data? So here, this is the official screenshot which I have taken from their official documentation. So which says that user data is a new version of a custom data. So in a nutshell, both works in the same way, but there are still differences. So user data can be retrieved from Azure instances using Azure Instance Metadata Service, which is an IMDS service through which you can still access the user data from your virtual machine without going into that particular virtual machine. So that's a one feature which you get with the user data. And this user data is persistence. It will be available during the lifetime of your virtual machine. So once you provision a virtual machine or set up a virtual machine using the user data, then that user data script will be available throughout the lifetime of that virtual machine, unless and until you destroy and delete that particular virtual machine. Thirdly, the user data can be updated outside the VM without stopping and rebooting the VM. So that's a new advantage which you get with the user data. So with the custom data, this was the feature which was not available, but the user data have the capability to update when you are running the virtual machine, and you can use the command line tools to supply the user script which you want to install onto that particular virtual machine with the help of user data. And also user data can be queried using the GetVM VMSS API, and which is really suitable if you want to do the troubleshooting. So you can use this API to get that particular user data which is running onto that particular virtual machine. So these are the key differences which you will see when you'll start working with your user data and custom data. So my recommendation over here is try to use user data because that is a more newer version, and it gives you a lot more flexibility when it comes to configuring the boot script for your virtual machine. In this session, we are going to talk about the load balancer, which is one of the most important topic when you're working with the Azure cloud. Let's take a look what we are going to implement towards the end of this chapter. So here you can see this is going to be our load balancer, which we need to implement to load balance our incoming traffic. And that incoming traffic will be routed onto this virtual machine, which is sitting inside our subnet. And here we will be targeting few machines inside our demo. So there will be more than one machine inside our subnet, which will be load balanced with the load balancer. And to implement this load balancer onto these 3 virtual machine, I'm just taking 3 virtual machine, but you can take more than 3, 4, 5. It just depends upon your requirement. So all of these virtual machine will be load balanced from here. And for that, we will need, first of all, we will need a VNet, we will need a subnet, we will need a route table, we will also need a network security group. Along with that, once we are done with all of these, then we need to provision these virtual machines, and these virtual machine we will try to provision more than one. And once these things are ready, then we are going to set up our load balancer along with the health probe, and then we will set up a load balancer rule, which will include this particular set of virtual machine along with the health probe, which will continuously monitor the health of these particular instances. And finally, the load balancer, which will start load balancing our request. So this is our target implementation, which we are going to see and understand like how the load balancer works into the Azure cloud. Alright, so here is my Azure portal. So let's start everything from the scratch for this particular load balancer tutorial, because we are going to cover quite a lot of concepts over here. So first of all, let's pull out our diagram where we were working. So here in this diagram, the first thing which we need to do is we need to start from the outer layer in this particular diagram. So here the outer layer is the resource group which we need to create. So let's get back to our portal, and here in the search box, just type resource group, click on this resource group and just create your first resource group where you will be placing all of your resources, which includes virtual machine, subnet, and even your load balancer as well. Here I will put a resource group name. So let's put demo LB, and RG is the resource group abbreviation. And here the reason is North Europe. I will be working only in the North Europe region for this particular demo. So if you are working in any other region, then make sure that you only use that particular region for any other resources as well. Then just simply click on review and create, and it will just create that particular resource group. And here you can see our resource group has been created. Moving further to the next step, the next thing we need to create over here is we need to create this VNet. VNet is our VPC, that is our virtual network in which we will be creating or placing all of our resources. So let's get back to our Azure portal over here, and here in the search box type VNet, click on this virtual network over here, then click on create over here. And here we are just gonna put in the details of our VNet. So first of all, we need to select the resource group, so which is our demo LBRG, which we just created. The name of the VNet, so here we will put demo LB VNet over here. And the region is North Europe region. Click next over here. Encryption, I'm just gonna skip. Bastion, I'm gonna skip. Firewall, let's skip everything over here because we don't need to change all of these settings yet, because we are focusing on the load balancer. Click next, and here we need to key in the CIDR range. So let's take a look onto the diagram. What is the CIDR range? So it is 10.0.0.0/16. So that's the same CIDR range over here. Subnets, which is default. No, I don't need a subnet. I will be creating my own subnet. So I have deleted that particular subnet. Then click on review and create, and it is running a validation. And after that, you can just simply click on create, and that will create you the virtual network with that particular CIDR range. And here you can see the deployment is in progress, and it might take a minute or so, and your VNet will be ready. And here you can see our VNet is ready. So click on go to resources. And here you can see this is the resource group, and inside that resource group, we are having this particular VNet with this particular IP range. Moving further, after creating the VNet, the next thing which we need to create is subnet. So here you can see this is the subnet, and this is the CIDR range we need to assign on to that particular subnet. So let's get back to our Azure portal, and here in the search box, we need to type VNet, click on the VNet and select the VNet which we have just created, which is this one. And here in the settings section, if you go over here, then you will find the options for a subnet. So here, just click on this subnet over here, and the purpose of a second subnet I'm selecting as a default. And the name, I would like to put a name over here, so I will put a demo LB subnet. And here the IP range, so let's take a look onto the diagram. What is the IP range which we have assigned? So it is 10.0.1.0/24. So assign that IP range over here. Sorry, the starting range should be here. So 10.0.1.0. And here the size is /24, which will give you 256 IP addresses within that particular virtual, subnet. Now after that, if you go further, then just you need to click on add over here. You don't need to select anything else for creating the subnet. And here you can see our subnet is ready. After creating the subnet, let's take a look what next resource we need to create. So far we have created the resource group, we have created a VNet, we have created a subnet, and the next thing which we need to create is our route table so that we can specify which incoming request to route to this particular subnet. And for that, again, go back to your Azure portal, and here in the search box, you need to type route tables. Click on this particular route table, and here you can see there is no route table. I will create my first route table over here. And here we need to select the resource group. So select the resource group, which is demo LBRG. And the region here, I need to select Europe, North Europe. After that, the name of the route table. So here I'm going to put demo LB. Let's put route table over here. And after that, propagate where route. So select yes. I don't want to change anything over here right now. Click next over here and click next. And after that, you just need to select, just let the validation pass and then click on create over here. And this will create you the route table for your this particular demo, which we are doing it for the load balancer. And here you can see the deployment is in progress, and the deployment is done now. So our resource is ready, which means our route table is ready. Now, after creating the route table, the key thing over here is we need to associate. So we need to tell this subnet and this route table that you both are associated with each other, so that they know that I need to route the traffic to this particular subnet over here. So we need to create this association, because right now subnet is there, route table is there, but there is no attachment between these two resources. I'm talking about subnet and the route table. So it is not an attachment, it is just an association. And association is telling a way that, hey, this is the route table for this particular subnet. So let's take a look how we can associate this particular subnet with this particular route table. All right, so to associate the route table with the subnet, first of all, in the search box, you need to type a route table. Go to the route table over here, select the route table which we have created. And here in the left-hand section, you will find the settings. Inside the settings, there is an option for a subnet. Click on this particular subnet. And here you will find the option to associate. So click on this associate, and here you will find the option to associate the subnet with the route table. And this is the subnet which we have just created before creating the route table. So click on OK. And here you can see it is saving this particular settings of association of subnet and route table. And now you can see the subnet is associated with this particular route table. Let's take a look again onto this particular diagram. So now we have already created a resource group, we have created a VNet, we have created a subnet, we have created a route table. And the next thing which is remaining is the virtual machine and the network security group. So first of all, let's focus on to the virtual machine, and then we are going to take a look onto the network security group for those virtual machine. So let's take a look how we can create the virtual machine. For that, let's go back to the portal, and in the search box, you need to type virtual machines. Click on this particular virtual machine, and here you can see there are no virtual machine we have created so far. Click on create over here, click on Azure Virtual Machine. Here from the drop down, select the resource group, which is demo LG resource group, virtual machine name. So here I'm going to select the virtual machine. Let's put demo LB virtual machine 1, because we will be creating at least 2 virtual machine for this particular demo. Reason is North Europe, availability zone is default, everything is default. Image, I'm gonna choose Ubuntu as my preferred image for this particular virtual machine. Authentication type through which you will be able to log into your virtual machine, so I'm gonna keep it as a SSH public key. Username, I'll change it to make it as a Rahul Wagh, and the SSH public key, I will click on use existing public key. And if you don't know how to create the public key and private key, then you can easily refer to the command SSH key gen. So let me open the terminal. And if you are using a Windows system, then just use WSL, which will provide you the Ubuntu or a Linux system for you, and through which you can also generate this SSH key. So here the command which you need to run is SSH key gen, and you need to hit enter. And this will create a key pair, which means you will have a public key as well as private key, and that will be saved at this location. This location will differ based on your laptop. So just make sure that you just go and take a look onto those SSH key, which will be saved onto that particular location. And once you generate those keys, then you will find these kind of a keys available onto your local machine. So here you can see this is the name which I have given. So if any key which doesn't have any extension, which you can see over here, then it is a private key. And if the key has an extension .pub, which means it is a public key. So this is how the keys will be generated, and those keys will be available onto this particular location. So I have already generated these keys. So I will just copy the content of this public key onto this particular location. And I have already chosen the option that use existing public key. That's why I'm just going to copy that particular content of my public key over here. So I'll copy the content and paste over here. So this is the key which I have updated over here. And the inbound port is 22 because you need to access your virtual machine. Then you need to have this port enabled on SSH. Click on next to disk. I will keep the default disk, which is 30 gigs. Click next to networking, and this is important. Here we have already created a VNet. If you take a look onto this particular diagram, then this is the VNet we have already created. So we need to select the same VNet over here. So here, just select the VNet, which is demo LB VNet. Then subnet, we are going to select this particular subnet which we have created. Public IP, yes, you can assign a public IP, but it depends upon your requirement. If you have a requirement to have a public IP, then you can assign the public IP. Otherwise, you can skip the public IP as well. But here I'm going to assign the public IP. After that, I will keep rest of the things default over here. Click next on management. Keep everything same. You don't need to change anything. Click next to monitoring. Next to advance, and I think we don't need to create a tags as well, and then click on review and create, and this will get you a first virtual machine. And here you can see the validation has passed, and then click on create over here. So this will give you your first virtual machine, and I'm going to follow exactly the same instruction which I just followed for this particular virtual machine. And then we are gonna see like how we need to set up our load balancer. So I will just fast forward and I'll show you the second virtual machine. In the background, I will be preparing the second virtual machine also. So once the second virtual machine is up and ready, then I will show you both the machine, and then we need to install some software packages onto that particular virtual machine. But let me create the second virtual machine also for you. Now I have provisioned the second virtual machine here as well. So here you can see both the virtual machines are up and running, and both the virtual machines have the public IP. So I would like to first show you that how we can access this virtual machine individually, and then we are going to jump to the load balancer, so that from load balancer we will try to access these two virtual machine and our request will be routed. But don't worry, that's the next step. But for this setup, till now we need to verify these virtual machines are accessible or not. So for that, what we need to do, we just need to copy this public IP address from here, go to terminal, and here you can see there are two terminals which I have opened. So here on the left hand side, the first terminal is for virtual machine 1, and this is one for virtual machine 2. So the command which I need to use over here is, let me open that particular command. So here we need to specify SSHI, this is command, and then we need to specify the private key, which I have just shown to you that I have already generated this public key and private key, and here I will be using the private key, followed with the username, which I have capped for this virtual machine, and followed by the IP address, which is going to be the public IP address. So let's remove this one again, copy this particular, let me recopy this particular one, go back over here and paste it. So this is the public IP, hit enter. And here you can see this is the virtual machine 1, which we have just logged in, then clear it. So here again, I'm gonna use the same public IP, but this time it is going to be second public IP. And here the command is SSHI, and then we need to supply the private key, the username, and the public IP, which is this one. Hit enter. And here you can see this is the second virtual machine which we have just accessed. All right, then clear it. And now our both the virtual machines are up and running, and we can access both the virtual machine. Now, since we need to put a load balancer, so we need to have some software or some software packages running onto this particular both the virtual machines, so that we can access the home page of that particular application by load balancer. And that application should be able to tell on which server it is running. So for that, I'm going to use the Apache 2 software onto this particular virtual machine. So for that, I'll use the command. I'll just copy this command, and all of these commands you will find into the description section, where I will be putting my GitHub repository as well as the blog post, where you will find all of these links available for you. So feel free to copy those commands from there. Anyway, so first of all, let me update the package manager for that both the virtual machine. So here I'm updating the package manager. And once the package manager is updated, then I'm gonna install the Apache 2 on both the machine. So let's wait till all the package manager has been installed. So sorry, the package manager has been updated. So it has been updated. I'll clear it on first virtual machine, then install the Apache 2, type yes over here. Similarly, onto this one also, I will type it and type yes over here. And here you can see on the left hand side, our Apache 2 has been installed. And on the right hand side, Apache 2 has been installed as well. Now, after installing the Apache, let's verify the home page. So first of all, we will verify from the local machine. So here we just gonna type localhost and port 80. And here you can see this is the public HTML page which is visible. Why I am showing to you this is because we need to configure the network security group on a port 80. So that's why I'm showing this page to you. And here also, if you run the command curl localhost on a port 80, then you will see the page, which is the home page of this Apache 2. But if you copy the same IP address, so this is the public IP address, and here if you try to access the same thing, then it will not be accessible. So here you can see it is keep on loading, but it is not able to load it because we have not configured the network security group for both the virtual machine. So if you take a look onto this particular diagram, so now I'm talking about this network security group. So we have installed Apache over here, and this Apache is running on a port 80, but we have not tell anything about the network security group that, hey, this port 80 should be open for inbound traffic. So that's where this network security group comes into picture. So what we need to do is we need to set up this network security group on a port 80 to allow the incoming traffic. So whenever a user is trying to access right now without load balancer, so it will try to see if the rule is existing, the network security group is existing or not for port 80. If it exists, then it will route that request to this particular virtual machine. All right, so let's get back to our Azure portal, and then we will set up the network security group. To set up the network security group for virtual machine, so here in the search box, you need to type virtual machine again, and let's open the first virtual machine, which is VM1. And here in the left hand side, you will find all the settings. So here you need to click on to the network settings, and in the network settings, you will find that there is a network security group which is assigned to this particular virtual machine. So which is this one. Right now, there is only one network security group which is allowing the port 22, which is used for SSH into this particular virtual machine. But we need to create a new one. So for that, what you need to do, you just need to click on this particular network security group. And here you need to go on inbound security group rule, click on add over here. So here you need to set the port 80 inbound security group rule for this particular network security group. Here you need to choose HTTP and it will automatically change for 80 because this is the default port for HTTP request. Source is any, which means that anyone can request this particular resource, and destination is also any over here. And after that, you just need to click on add over here. And it will create this network security group, and this has been done for virtual machine 1. So we need to do for other virtual machine as well. So click on this virtual machine home page, go to second virtual machine, go to here networking, go to network settings. Here in the bottom, you will find the second network security group, and here inbound security group rule, click on plus over here. Again, select the service to the HTTP port 80, and then click on add over here. And this will create a second network security group for second virtual machine. So now both the virtual machines have the network security group for port 80, which you can verify from here. So here we have, let me take a look. I need to refresh this one. And here you can see this is the port 80, which is now available as a network security group for virtual machines. Now we have set up the network security group. So let's try to access the public IP and try to access the home page of both the virtual machine. So here I'm going to copy this public IP, go to the new tab, paste it over here and go to port 80, click enter. And here you can see our default home page of first virtual machine is visible. Secondly, I will just copy the other public IP address, go to the next tab, paste it over here, port 80, and then hit enter. And here you can see the second home page of this virtual machine. But for this particular demo, as you can see, both the page are identical because both the pages are of same service. So what I will do, I will just try to replace this home page with the custom IP address of that particular virtual machine. So we will just show the private IP of that particular virtual machine so that we can identify that our request is landing on which virtual machine. So for that, what we need to do, we just need to again go back to our terminal, which is this one. And here we need to update the home page. To update the home page of that particular virtual machine, I'm going to run this particular command, and this will do a very simple task. It will just go to this particular location, which is the index.html, which is the home page of that particular virtual machine. And there it is going to insert this particular HTML code, which is very simple, which is just telling you the server detail, which is in a header1 format. And then it is just going to fetch the private IP address. Sorry, I just made a mistake over here by copy pasting. So I will clear it and I'll paste it again. And here it will just print the host IP address of that particular virtual machine. So what you need to do, you just need to copy and paste this command and hit enter. And now it has been updated. So here you can see this is how it will show the output to you when we will access this particular virtual machine. Let me recheck if I have copied the whole command correctly. I'll just copy it. I'll clear the screen and paste it over here. Okay, so the permission is denied. So previous command, I have not copied it successfully. So what you need to do, you just need to use sudo and then paste the command. I think I need to change the permission of this index.html. Since I'm not a root user, so that's why I was not able to change or update the file. So what I did is I just run the command sudo su so that I can become a root of this particular machine. And after that, I was able to update this particular content of HTML page. So same thing which I will do over here also. So I will become a root user, and after that I will just gonna update this particular file. So I will paste the command over here, and here you can see we have updated the content of that particular file. Next thing what you can do, you can just exit and become a normal user, and here again I will exit and become a normal user. I'll clear the screen on both the side, and after that we just need to restart the Apache. So for that you need to run the command systemctl restart, I guess, and then it's Apache 2. Okay, so that's command is correct, so I have done it. And same over here also, just run the command so that the new page will be updated as a home page for this both the virtual machine. Now since both the machine has restarted, so let's get back to our home page, and here you can see this is our first server which is ending with 212 IP address. Let's hit enter, and here you can see I will zoom a bit over here, and now it is telling you the host name which is demo LB VM. Now we can easily identify that our request is going on this particular first VM, and here refresh this one also, and here we will also, I'll zoom a bit over here also, and here you can see our request is going on a VM2 with this particular IP address. So this is really essential when we are working with the load balancer, so that you know that your request is going and landing on a which server. So that's why I have updated these two pages. Now comes the most important concept of load balancer, like how we are gonna set up this particular load balancer. So right now you can see I have taken two virtual machines. So right now in the diagram I'm representing 3, but in our case we are working with the 2 virtual machine, and now we need to set up this particular load balancer. So this user will try to access only the load balancer, and load balancer will route our request to these 2 virtual machines. And it can be more than 2, 3, 4, it just depends upon your requirement. So this is how the load balancer will work, and this is the one which we need to implement. Moving forward, in the next slide you will see that there is also a concept of a backend pool. So what does it mean by the backend pool? So here you can see that we will have a group of virtual machine, and right now in our current example we are taking 2 virtual machine. But let's try to understand this concept of a backend pool. So whenever you're working with the load balancer, then you need to create this backend pool which I am representing over here. So backend pool is just a logical grouping of our virtual machine. So what we will do, we will just put our virtual machine into this particular backend pool, and it can be more than 1, 2, 3, 4 virtual machines. So all of these machines we are going to put into this backend pool, and we are going to create this backend pool in the Azure portal. And once this backend pool is configured, then we will tell load balancer to use this backend pool, so that load balancer doesn't need to worry about that how many machines are there. It is just already created into this backend pool. So that's how this backend pool will tell load balancer that, hey, these are the group of machines where you need to route your requests. So let's start at least these steps we need to implement first, and then we will take what next we need to do into this particular virtual machine load balancer setup. So let's get back to our Azure portal, and here in the search box you need to type load balancers. Click on the load balancers over here, and here you can see there are no load balancers, so I need to click on create over here. Here resource group, remember the same resource group which is demo lbrg, and the name, so here we can put demo lb, which is our load balancer in the North Europe region. SKU I'm gonna keep standard, and type I'm gonna keep it public because I just want to access our virtual machine from a public. So here, and the tier is regional because this is just a demo and I don't have a worldwide application which is accessible throughout the world. So I will keep everything regional based on my current location. Then click on IP configuration. So, okay, so let's skip all of these points over here. So first of all, let's only create the load balancer, and these are the things which we are going to configure later on. Click on backend pool. one important thing over here, we need to assign the front-end IP address before you skip any of these other things. So what is the front-end IP address? So whenever you're working with the load balancer, which is this one which I'm representing, then it needs to have a public IP, because you are telling that, hey, this is your public load balancer. So it should have a public IP, and that public IP we need to assign through this front-end IP configuration. So here, click on plus over here, name of the front-end IP. So here you can see demo LB front-end public IP, and the public IP address. So here you can just click on create new, and here you can put like a demo LB public IP. Then click on save over here, and gateway load balancer you just don't need to worry about. Click on save over here, and here you can see the front-end public IP is assigned to it. Then click on the, I think we can just skip backend pool, inbound pool, outbound pool, tags. We are gonna cover all of these one by one, but this is just two things which we will do right now: load balancer and front-end IP for that particular load balancer. Click on review and create, and validation is green, so click on create over here. And it will take a minute or so for creating the deployment of our load balancer. So I'll be back once this load balancer, okay, so it was really quick actually, you can see, and here you can see our go to load balancer, and our load balancer is ready right now. Now the next thing is, now we have configured the load balancer, we have configured the front-end IP, which you can see now we got the public IP address of this particular load balancer as well. The next thing is we need to configure the backend pool, so which I have just explained to you. For this is the one. So we need to tell this, we need to create this backend pool, and in this backend pool we need to assign these virtual machines as well. So for that, let's get back to backend pool. Click on add over here, and the backend pool name. So here I will put demo LB backend pool VMs. Then the virtual network, so we have created this virtual network, select that one, and here there are two options, NIC or IP address. So I will choose IP address over here, and here you can see we need to choose, these are the two virtual machine which you see. Here you can see this is the 4 and this is the 5, both are visible. So we need to select both the machines. So if you take a look onto this particular diagram, so although I am representing over here 3, but here we are taking these and these virtual machine, which is one is ending with the 4 and one is ending with the 5. Okay, so here I'm gonna put the first one and then second one. So both the virtual machine I have put into this backend pool. Then click on save over here, and it will take, this step might take a couple of minutes, so be patient with this backend pool creation. Now after a minute or so, you can see over here that my backend pool has been created. And moving forward, let's take a look onto the diagram. So now our backend pool has been created, and our backend pool is now containing our two virtual machine, which is these two virtual machine, which is ending with 4 and 5. Now the next step over here is, after creating the load balancer and backend pool, the next thing which we need to create is the health probe. So this health probe will keep on polling onto these virtual machine on both the virtual machine in the backend pool, and it will keep on polling on a port 80 to verify the health of these virtual machine, so that load balancer can redirect a request on the healthy instances of the virtual machine. So for creating the health probe for our load balancer, you need to specify which port they need to poll. So in our case, the port is 80. So for that, what you need to do, again go to your load balancer, and here you can see front-end configuration is done, backend pool is done, and now we need to create a health probe. So health probe creation is quite simple. Just click on plus over here, and you just need to specify the name of the health probe. So here I will specify it demo LB health probe. The protocol is TCP and the port is 80, as I have told you, and the interval second. So it will keep on polling on every 5 seconds onto those virtual instances. Click on save over here, and now our probe will be created quite soon. And here you can see our probe has been created. Moving further, as you can see, I have added the IP, but this IP we have already created, so you don't need to worry about which is our front-end IP configuration, so which is already done. Okay, so now this setup is pretty much ready, but there is one more thing which will combine everything together, which we call it as a load balancer rule. So if you go forward, then we need to attach everything together, and for that we need to create a load balancer rule. So here we need to put everything together, which will include front-end IP configuration, which is this one. Then we will also include backend pool, and then we will also include health probe interval also. So all of these things should be glued together. So which you can see from here also. Let me undo these circles. So we need to glue front-end configuration, backend pool, health probe, and all of these three things should go into this particular load balancing rule. All right. So for that, just click on this load balancing rule over here, click on add over here. So here you will put the name. So I will put the demo LB rule over here, which is load balancing rule. So front-end IP configuration, if you click on this particular drop down, then it will show you the front-end IP configuration. I think I did a mistake over here in the front-end IP address configuration. That's why this dropdown is not popping the value. So for that, what you need to do, you just need to go back to the load balancer, and we need to recheck the settings once again. So here I will just go on the load balancer and click on this particular load balancer. Go to front-end IP configuration, and here you can see this is the front-end IP configuration we have created, but here we have selected the option as a IP prefix, which is wrong. Instead of that, we need to choose the IP address. That was the mistake I did. So here you need to click on create new. Sorry, I need to select IP address, click on create new, and here I need to choose demo LB public IP. After that, you just need to select the routing option, which is Microsoft Network, and then simply click on save over here. And after that, you just need to click on save once again over here. And it will create the front-end configuration with the public IP. Previously, I have just chosen the option of an IP prefix, which was wrong. So that's the step which I have to correct, and I would request you to correct also for your load balancer to work. So here you can see it is just getting deployed. So here you can see it is deployed now. And now we will go back and try to configure our load balancer rule. So here we were configuring the load balancer rule. So just refresh this page once again, because so that it can pop all the values back. So here we need to set up the demo LB rule over here. And here in the drop down, you can see the IP of a front end is visible right now. The backend pool, which we have created. So this is the backend pool which we have created. Protocol is TCP, and the port is 80 over here. The backend port is also 80 over here, and health probe. So here you can see the health probe is also created, which is this one. The session preference persistence, keep it none. Ideal timeout is 4 seconds, which is fine. And I think rest of the things which we need to keep as is, we don't need to change anything at all. Then click on save over here, and this will create the load balancing rule. And once this load balancing rule is done, then we will try to access our application through the load balancer public IP. Now, after saving our load balancer rule, then again we need to click on the load balancer, click on the load balancers over here, go to the load balancer, go to the front-end IP configuration, and this is the public IP right now. So now we will try to access only with this particular public IP, and our machines, both the machines should be accessible. So if you take a look onto this particular diagram, then here I will just try to access the public IP of this load balancer, and this will automatically direct my request to this virtual machine as well as this particular virtual machine, which is ending with 4 and which is ending with 5. And I will only access single IP address over here for this particular load balancer. So this is how it should work. So let's try to fetch the public IP. So this is the public IP of a load balancer. Just copy this one from here. Go to the new tab. I will close the previous tab over here. Just paste it and hit enter. And here you can see it is redirecting. And now my request is redirected to 5. I will just refresh this page once again, and here it is redirecting it to 4. Just refresh it once again, and it will keep on round robbing, and it will just keep on redirecting this request to the servers. So this is how this particular whole, here you can see it is again redirecting it to 5. So this is how the load balancer setups work into the Azure virtual machine, and once you set up it properly, then it will start redirecting your request to the multiple virtual machine. And this backend pool, you can have a 1, 2, more than 2 or 3 virtual machine inside the backend pool. It just depends upon your requirement. I hope you enjoyed this particular tutorial on load balancer. If you have any comments, then please put down into the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and also to the membership program of this particular channel, because there are a lot of similar sessions which I have already uploaded for Azure, which will be really beneficial if you're just really targeting on a Azure mastering. And also there are if you are planning for AWS also, then also there are a lot of sessions I have already prepared for a membership program, so please go and check out those sessions as well. Moving to the next chapter, now we are going to talk about the one more concept which clubs very well with the load balancer of Azure is the virtual machine Scaleset. Let's try to understand the concept why we need to use the Azure Virtual Machine Scaleset. As you can see onto my screen, there are certain points which I have mentioned about the Scaleset of Azure. So here the most possible and the most used reason for Scaleset in Azure is the traffic. So when you are having a high traffic coming to your virtual machine, then you would like to increase your number of virtual machines so that you can cater the incoming request which is coming to consume your application services. And on the other hand, then there might be a scenario then you don't have much of a traffic, and in that case you want to reduce the number of a virtual machine. So I'm talking about this particular scenario also, so that we don't need that many virtual machines, so that we have the ability to decrease our number of virtual machine running into Azure cloud. So to handle this kind of a scenario where we have a high traffic and low traffic, this Azure Virtual Machine Scaleset comes really handy. You just need to create a Azure Virtual Machine Scaleset in which you need to define the minimum number of VM and maximum number of VM. So for example, if you have defined like a minimum number of virtual instances as 2 and the highest number of instances as a 10, then these are the numbers where the traffic will distribute onto the virtual machine based on the need. So suppose if the traffic is very low, then in that case only 2 virtual machine will be up and running. But in case if there is a surge, there is a high number of traffic coming to your application, then it will automatically scale and it will go reach till the limit of a 10 virtual machine which you have defined in your virtual machine Scaleset. So what happens with that is, in case if you receive a high traffic coming to your application, then you still have a capacity to serve those requests coming to you. And by any chance, if for example in the night, if you don't see that much of traffic, then it will automatically reduce down to the lower number, which is 2 over here. So all of these feasibility and features are provided by the Azure Virtual Machine Scaleset. Here you can see these are the benefits which I have highlighted to you. So scale in and scale out, the example which I have explained with the minimum number of a CPU and maximum number of a CPU. More automatic control on your VM. So you don't need to manually go and create your own virtual machine if there is a high traffic coming to you. Azure Virtual Scaleset will take care of you on your behalf once you configure the virtual machine low number and high number properly. Third, it is cost effective. Why it is cost effective? Because suppose you have a traffic which is like a high traffic coming to your application, and that traffic lasts for only couple of hours. Then remaining hours, you don't need that many number of CPUs running to serve your application. So in that case, it will be a cost saving for you when you reduce down your virtual machine in your Azure cloud. So that's why the Azure Virtual Machine Scalesets are really comes handy when there is no traffic or low traffic to your application, so that you don't incur that many cost for running your application. And at last, it is really beneficial for a high workload, so which you can really configure and tweak it based on your incoming traffic volume. Let's take a look like how the Azure Virtual Scaleset for virtual machine will work in reality. Of course, we will do the demo after this. But here, this is our load balancer, which will have our public IP, and through that public IP, we will be accessing our virtual machine. But before we access our virtual machine, there is a scale set sitting in between. So in this scale set, I'm just taking a very hypothetical example, but in the demo, we are going to cover it. So don't worry about it. So here we are going to define that, hey, I will create a scale set, and in that scale set, I will be creating 3 virtual machines on a need basis. So that number, I can pick it and put it inside my scale set, and that scale set will provision the 3 virtual machine. And also with the help of scale set, we will be able to set these all things connected with our load balancer, so that our load balancer can easily point to this particular scale set, and all the virtual machine running inside those scale set will automatically get the request routed through those load balancer. So you don't need to worry about like how the incoming request is getting routed to these virtual machines. Now, when you will create the scale set, then you are going to define a backend pool. The backend pool, which we have just covered into our previous chapter, where we have created a load balancer. So here you can see that this is our scale set, which is present inside this particular box in the pink color, but here is our backend pool, and a backend pool can contain a scale set. So whatever number of CPUs which are running into that scale set, so this particular backend pool will redirect those requests based on the load balancer, which is receiving those requests from the user. And also on top of that, you can easily set up the health prop, which will continuously go and check the health of your virtual machine for your incoming traffic which is coming through the load balancer. And finally, you can club everything together with the load balancer rule. So this load balancer rule will contain the public IP which you need, and then you will need a health prop, then you will need a scale set, and then you will need a backend pool. So now we are going to jump into the demo, and I'm going to show you like how we can create all of these components one by one. So before that, what I will do, I will just erase everything over here, and first of all, we are just going to go and create our load balancer, and in that load balancer, we are just going to create this front end IP. So these are the 2 things we are going to create first of all inside our load balancer, and after that we are going to take a look onto the scale set. But let's go and try to create our first load balancer. Here is my Azure portal, and if I can show you my existing setup, so here in the resource group, I have already created a resource group which is Dev EU North RG, and that resource groups contain my VNet and the Subnet. But you don't need to worry about that part. We are going to see pretty soon. So here, first of all, let's create a load balancer. Click on this particular load balancer. Here, I'm just going to create my first load balancer. And here we need to choose the resource group. So I'm going to choose Dev EU North, which I just shown to you. And the name, so here I'm going to put demo LB Scaleset. The region I'm going to put North Europe, and the type I'm going to put public as for load balancer. Click next for front-end IP configuration. So here I'm going to add a IP configuration. So here I will put a demo LB front-end IP. And here I'm going to create the public IP. So here I will put demo LB public IP. Click save over here and then click save. And then I will just go and click on review and create. So it will just run some validation, and then I will hit create, and this will create me a load balancer. So now we have created a load balancer, which is just getting ready, and I have associated the front-end IP for my load balancer. So it will take a minute or so, and here you can see my load balancer is ready. And here in this load balancer, which you can see for Scaleset, I have only created a front-end configuration, which is this one. All right, now what is next? So if I go back to the diagram, and let me go back over here. So now the next thing which we need to do is we need to create our scale set. So we have created our load balancer, we have created our front-end IP configuration. Let's get back to our Azure portal, and here in the search box, you can type virtual scale sets. So click on this virtual machine skill sets option, and here you can see there is no skill set which I have created so far. So click on create over here. And here I'm going to choose exactly the same resource group where I was working, the name of my skill set. So here I'm going to put demo VM skill set, and the region I'm going to put is North Europe region. Availability zone, I'm keeping it default. And here orchestration mode, instead of flexible, I would like to keep it uniform, as it says like optimize for large scale stateless workload. So that is what we need for this particular use case. Security type, I'm keeping trusted launch virtual machine, and the instance count which I was telling you about. So here you can set the instance count like 2, 3, 10, 20, 30, 40. But since we are doing this demo, so I am keeping it to the 2. So now once I set this value to the 2, then whenever I create this virtual skill set for virtual machine, then it is going to provision me at least 2 virtual machine keep in running. And the image, I'm gonna keep it as a Ubuntu. Size is standard one. I'm just sticking with the minimum possible because I'm just doing it for the demo purpose. Authentication type, and I have already like shown you like how to create your SSH key, public key and private key. So I'm going to skip with the same concept. But in case if you feel difficulty for the skill set and setting up these, then you can still choose the option of a username and password. So you just need to keep in mind of your username and password, which you will eventually need for login into or SSH into your virtual machine. But for the time being, I'm using my own username and public key for this particular virtual machine. So I will copy that public key from my system and paste it over here, which I have already generated. So here I will choose the option of a existing public key, paste the key, and then click on next spot. Save money with Spot. So these are the Spot instances which are like a very cheap from Azure Cloud, and these you can easily get. So instead of getting a dedicated instances, if you choose and stick with the Spot instances, then your cost will be very low in the Azure Cloud. Okay, so I have choose the Spot. Click on next disk. So disk I will keep it default, which is 30 gigs. Click to the networking, and here I will choose the group, which is our resource group, and the VNet which I have created. So here I'm just gonna use this particular VNet which I have been using for creating all of my resources, and here the name of my network interface which I want to associate, because I have been working into that particular resource group and that particular VNet within that particular resource group. After that, click on next management over here. I'm not going to choose the Azure Load Balancer, which we will take a look later. Click next. And remember, we are still creating the skill set over here. We are not doing anything else apart from it. Here, upgrade mode. So here, try to keep it automatic. So any changes which you roll out, so your virtual machine will be automatically upgraded. So for example, if you have a 10 or 15 virtual machine running, then you want to upgrade them automatically instead of going them to those individual machine and doing it manually. So that's why I'm keeping this option as automatic over here. After that, keep rest of the things as is. You don't need to change anything. Next on health, let's keep that part, go to advanced. So here I would like to install some of the basic Apache 2 software so that I can go and access the homepage of my Apache 2. This Apache 2 I have also explained into the load balancer section, but don't worry, I'm just going to explain it once again to you here as well. So here I will copy the bash script which is needed as a part of either you can put it inside the custom data, or also you can put it inside your user data. So these are just pre-boot script which you can run, which will run when your machine is getting started. So suppose if your skill set is trying or planning to start a new virtual machine, then this service will automatically be installed as a part of this boot up script. So here I'm going to paste the script. So it is simply going to update your package manager. It is going to install the Apache. It is going to update the home page with it will just show you the IP address of the home page. And then after this, it is going to restart your Apache 2. It is as simple as that. So I'll also put all of these information into the description section in the blog post link, so try to use this script from there. After that, I think everything is okay. Click on next tags. I will skip the tags also, and we are pretty much ready. And here I will just go and click on create. Now it will create a Azure Virtual Machine Scaleset, and in that Scaleset we are gonna see at least 2 virtual machine up and running. It might take a couple of minutes to start this particular virtual machine Scaleset, so I'll be back once it is up and running. Here you can see my deployment is complete. So go to the Scaleset resource. I will close this from the right side, and also in the search box you can also go from there. So let's take a look from the top. So virtual machine Scaleset. So click on this Scaleset over here, and here you can see this is Scaleset which we have just created. Click on it. And here on the instances, if you click over here, then here you can see at least 2 instances which is up and running. So these are the 2 virtual machine instances where we will be working. Okay, anyway, now let's take a look onto the diagram. And here I will go back and I will just start my pane over here. So now we have created the Scaleset. Along with that, we have already created a load balancer and front-end IP configuration. The next thing is we need to attach this particular Scaleset to this backend pool. So now we need to create a backend pool, and in that backend pool, we need to attach this particular Scaleset. What we need to do, let's get back to our homepage of our Azure portal, search and type the load balancer, which we have just created. This is the load balancer which we have created in the past. And here in the settings section, you will see we have already created the front-end configuration, which is good. Then the backend pool. And here we are going to create the backend pool, which I was talking about over here in the diagram. So in this backend pool, click on add over here. Put the name of our backend pool. So here I'm going to put demo LB backend pool network. So here I'm going to choose this one over here. Click on add, because this is the VNet where I'm working. Click on add over here, and here you can see our Scaleset which is visible over here. So select this particular virtual VM Scaleset from the list. Click on add over here. Click on save. And now our backend pool is getting deployed. So it will take a minute or so. And once it is deployed, then we will be able to see that, hey, our load balancer is also pointing to the Scaleset which we have just created. Here you can see our deployment has been successful, which you can see from here. And as a part of deployment, we should be able to see the virtual machine. So I'll close this from here, and here you can see our backend pool, and in this backend pool we are getting the 2 virtual machine, which is our instance 0 and instance 1. So here you can see our Scaleset is working. It is attached to our application load balancer which we have just created. Now let's take a look what is next we need to create from the diagram. So here you can see we have already covered this part. We have already covered a Scaleset. We have covered the backend pool, and these both are attached with each other. The next thing, it would be the health check. So we need to configure the health check for these virtual machines so that those are up and running, and those health check will keep on monitoring them so that it will route the request to the healthy instance instead of a non-healthy instance. So that's why we need our health check. Now let's get back to our Azure portal, and here on the left hand side you will find an option for a health prop. So click on this health prop. Click on add, and here we need to specify the health prop. So I will put the name as a demo Scaleset LB health prop, and the port we will be looking for is 80, which is 80, and the interval, it will always keep on polling on a 5-second interval. Click on save over here, and now our health prop has been created. And here you can see this health prop is there. Now let's take a look onto the diagram once again. And if I start checking our list, so this is done, Scaleset is done, backend pool is done, attachment is also done, our health check prop is also done. Now the next thing which we need to do is we need to create a load balancer rule so that everything is added together. So plus, and here you can see also plus. So all of these different services of our load balancer are clubbed together with this particular load balancing rule. So for that, let's get back to our Azure portal, and here after the health prop, you will find the option for a load balancing rule. Click on this one, click on add over here, and here we are going to specify all of these things, which means from our IP, from our Scaleset, from our backend pool, from our health prop. So everything we need to specify over here in the load balancing rule. So let's get back over here. So here I will put a demo LB load balancing rule. Front-end IP address. So here you can see this is the one which we have created. I'm talking about this one over here. So we have attached this one into the load balancer rule. Next is backend pool. So this is the backend pool. And now I'm talking about this one over here. And after that, the protocol is TCP and the port is 80 because that's what we are using. And this is also 80. Health prop is also this one which we have just created. I'm talking about this particular health prop which we have attached now. After that, if you go further, session persistence, I'll just keep it none. And I think we are good now. After that, click on save over here. And now our load balancer rule is created and this whole setup is now ready. This whole setup is now ready, and a user can make a request to this particular load balancer. Sorry, I was just going there, but to this load balancer, and then here the request will then again start routing to these virtual machines from here, and here. All right. So let's take a look if our load balancer rule has been created. So here you can see our load balancer rule has been created. But there is also one more thing which we need to check, that our virtual machines are allowing the port 80 or not. If you take a look onto this particular load balancing rule, then we are going to use the port 80. So we need to make sure that a port 80 is accessible onto the virtual machine. So for that, what you need to do, and our virtual machine where it is running into our Scaleset. So here you can see. So this is Scaleset, and in that Scaleset we have these virtual machine. So what we need to do, we need to go back and search for virtual machine Scaleset. So click on this Scaleset over here, go to the virtual machine Scaleset, go to the instances over here, click on one instance out of it, go to the network settings over here, and here you will find the network security group, which is this one, basic EU, which will be created for you. And here you can see there is no port 80, which means there is no incoming traffic which is allowed on port 80. So we need to make sure that the load balancer which we have just configured, which is allowing you to access port 80, should be allowed into the network security group of our virtual machine. So here, click on this one. This is our network security group settings, and here click on inbound security rules, which is our incoming traffic. So here click on add and add the port, which is our HTTP, and it will automatically take the port 80 because this is the default port for HTTP traffic. Click on add over here, and it will take a minute, and here you can see our port 80 is configured. So if you go back to virtual machine Scaleset, go back again, go back to instances, let's take a look onto the instance one, because the same network security group will be applied to this one also, which we have configured already into the first one. So click on this one, go to the network settings, and here take a look onto this particular one, and here you can see the port 80 is already available over there, which means our whole setup is ready, and now we can access through the load balancer, and our request should route through this Scaleset. Let's try to see the front end IP of our load balancer so that we can access it, because our load balancer is our public load balancer. So here type load balancers. Go to the load balancer, click on the load balancer over here, go to the front end configuration, and from here copy this IP address and go to the new tab and paste this IP address. And here you can see our instances are accessible. So here you can see the IP is the first request went to the 10.0.1.6, and if I refresh it, then it is going to the next one, which is 10.0.1.5. So this Scaleset virtual machine are now entertaining my requests. So our load balancer is automatically setting those or sending those requests to these virtual machines present into my Scaleset of our Azure virtual machine. Alright, so now we have seen a very basic demo of our Azure Virtual Machine Scaleset. But Azure Virtual Machine Scaleset, as I told you, it is really powerful to scale in and scale out the virtual machine based on the traffic. So let's take a look like how we can set up this scaling configuration for our virtual machine. So again, if you go to the Azure Virtual Machine dashboard, or which is this home page of our Azure Virtual Machine Scaleset, so here you will find the Scaleset which we have just created. So click on this Scaleset over here, and I will just close this left pane over here so that we can get a little bit more screen. And here in the left hand side, you will find the option for availability and scale. So just expand this option, and here you will find the option for a scaling. So if you take a look onto this scaling option, then it will give you a more power and more granular control on when to scale in and scale out your virtual machine. So here, instead of manual, so here you can see this is the settings which we did for 2 CPUs, but now I would like to put a custom scale, custom auto scaling. So select this option over here, and here you will find the auto scaling name, so which you can change or which you can modify. Resource group name, of course, I would like to stick with the same because that's where I'm working right now. But now I'm more interested into getting more granular. So what do you mean by the granular? So for example, like in your virtual machine, you can have a measure that, hey, your CPU is increasing by if your CPU consumption increase below or above 85, then you should increase your virtual machine. So let's put it in a simple way. So there is a parameter which you are trying to define for scaling that, hey, if the CPU capacity reaches 85%, then you should start adding more CPUs. So what will happen that if you are having a 2 virtual machine running onto your Scaleset, and if you have already configured that, hey, if the CPU usage rises to 85%, then please add one more virtual machine, then it will automatically add a 3rd virtual machine. So those kind of a granularity which you can control with this scaling option. So here you can see I should choose the option like scale based on metric. And here you can define the minimum, maximum, and the default virtual machine you want to run. So minimum, when you have a lower traffic, then I would say that, hey, keep the minimum over here, which you can keep it 1 or 2. Maximum, it just depends upon your traffic. So if you have a larger traffic, then you can keep it 10, 20, 30, 40 as well. And the default, if it's a normal traffic, then you can keep it to the default, which is 2 over here. Now, where are the rules for CPU, memory, and those granular controls? So here, if you click on this add rule, then you will find those options. So here you can see the matrix namespace criteria. So virtual machine host, yes, because we are working on a virtual machine. The metric name, which is quite important. So here you can see the percentage CPU per premium data does. So it is really granular. So you can have a lots of parameters which you can configure for your auto scaling. But in most of the cases, people go with the percentage of CPU usage. And here you can just add a value like, hey, how much you want to put it. So if it goes beyond 60, 80, 90, 95, then you can just keep on tweaking this parameter. So this kind of a granularity and control is offered from the Azure Virtual Machine Scaleset, which you can really leverage and to manage your high incoming traffic workload, as well as to manage your low incoming traffic workload as well. Put down any comments if you have about this particular chapter about the Azure Virtual Machine Scaleset, and if you don't understand any of the topic or a concept within this particular session, then please put down into the comment section and I'll try to answer those.